A Fantastic Mental Breakdown, a book by George M. Knowles. Illustrated by Javadoodles and Emily Satterfield. The night it all changed. I was a lifelong atheist until I had a fairly cliché near-death experience on the worst night of my life. I met something which was definitely the character people have mistaken for God. It explained to me that humanity is a hive mind and gave me hints at a scientific explanation for what it is and how it works. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful to be alive, but I'm not the kind of guy that just accepts heaven and ghosts and all that nonsense, despite literally seeing heaven and ghosts and all that nonsense. With a second chance at life, I invite you to join me on a magical journey to explore evolution, the afterlife, ghosts, God, reincarnation, spiritual possession, psychic connections, aliens, and more. With your help, we can determine if there's any truth to the message I received, or if I just had a very productive mental breakdown. I'll be honest about my experience, and you'll be the judge. What is the hive mind? When I left my body, it explained to me that it's an organized manifestation of all of humanity. We humans are one organism disguised as many. There's no supernatural sky daddy sitting on a cloud smiting with lightning bolts or getting angry when you touch yourself. What many believed was God as a separate entity is apparently just all of us subconsciously combined. But we don't participate in its thinking any more than any individual human body cell participates in the overall thinking of a human brain. Humans are essentially cells of humanity's hive mind. We do what we do to survive, just like our cells do what they do to survive, but we are blissfully unaware of the bigger picture. A white blood cell is only concerned with kicking the shit out of a virus, but it isn't aware of the complexities of our taxes. We are similarly as ignorant of the hive mind's thoughts and goals as our cells are to our goals. The hive mind loves us just like we love our own cells, but our physical bodies are most definitely disposable to it, just like our fat cells are disposable to us when we're starving. I gathered from speaking to the hive mind, and from the months afterward, that its main goals are the survival and growth of humanity as a whole and the survival of the planet. It's not supernatural. I'm not suggesting anything supernatural here. I'm suggesting we simply don't understand how it works yet. Similar principles to what I'm suggesting are established in other species. Scientists know certain insects function as if they have a single mind. This doesn't mean they're linked in a psychic way. They use pheromones, sound, and a handful of other forms of communication to behave as a single unit. Each individual insect can be thought of as a single cell, and the collection of them can be thought of as one organism with one mind. I believe we exist under a similar structure, we just don't know it. But how could we be connected? There are examples in modern technology that show brain energy can be read from outside the brain. You can already slap a helmet with sensors on someone's head, and they can control a computer. We know our brains emit magnetic and electrical energy that doesn't get stuck in our skulls and bounce around inward. These energies travel outward infinite distances, but of course they diminish significantly as they go. We also know animals can read forms of these signals. Magnetoreception, which is the ability for animals to navigate using Earth's magnetic fields, is common in many animals. Put the two together, and we can see that living things can both emit and read long-range energy signals. That's a very long way from proof of communication, but a step in the right direction. Now think about the cell phone in your hand. It uses 100 times less energy than a human brain during minute-to-minute operation, but a typical iPhone can send a signal to a satellite in space. What's even more interesting about cell phones is that there are billions and billions of devices using very similar or identical frequencies in overlapping proximity. But despite your phone being bombarded by signals from millions of other phones at any given time, it only receives the messages it needs to and safely ignores all the signals it shouldn't receive. My best guess is if it can be done with hunks of metal, it can be done with hunks of meat.
That's not what we meant.
We must also consider physics we barely understand and have yet to discover. There are tons of other fun-proven scientific concepts like quantum entanglement, which demonstrates two particles can be connected instantaneously at unfathomable distances and through obstructions. Not saying this is happening in human brains, but I'm saying there must be millions of different phenomena that have escaped our primitive observation that could maybe explain how the hive mind operates. We've had electricity for less than 150 years. We haven't even scratched the surface of what there's left to discover. If we want to get away from theorizing how psychic connections could work, we could just skip to the government research where supposedly it's been used in practice. The US government has spent decades and millions of dollars paying scientists to research psychic connections. Look up Project Stargate or read any of the books about it. In these missions, supposedly government employees were able to meditate and see military installations on the other side of the world. In one mission, a man drew a Russian nuclear submarine from thousands of miles away. Many called him ridiculous, but when all was said and done, the drawings were said to be an accurate depiction confirmed by other sources. More of these cases were documented, and a handful of missions were considered to have been proven successful, with no other explanation than, yeah, I guess that guy is psychic. There's a CIA paper called Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process. You can Google and read it right now. It attempts to give a scientific explanation to remote viewing and similar psychic activity. Here's a page I shamelessly stole from it. The highlight reads, in other words, the signal from the movement of our bodies will travel around the world in about 1/7 of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. It claims our bodies can send signals around the entire planet, similar to the cell phone analogy. I read the paper, but the physics and biology are too advanced for me, and I couldn't tell you if anything there was or wasn't true.
After decades of research, I have concluded that we are all nuts.
It doesn't matter so much. The part I want you to focus on is that there has been enough substance to psychic abilities in humans that real government scientists with doctorate degrees ran psychic missions for decades and even have a theory on a scientific explanation behind it. If I'm a little crazy for merely suggesting humans can act subconsciously, they're all very crazy for spending decades researching and weaponizing it. It's hidden in plain sight. Maybe you're familiar with the concept of distributed computing. When a problem is too large for one computer to solve, we use hundreds or thousands. Software engineers break down the problem and send smaller sections of it to thousands of other computers, nodes. Each node performs calculations, then returns the results to the main computer, which crunches those results together to solve the full problem. When you look into any of these individual nodes, the data really means very little to represent the whole of the problem. Software engineers can be extra clever for security purposes, and for lack of a better word, they can scramble the data in such a way that if a hacker got their hands on one of these nodes, the data would look like nonsense. But all of the calculations per node are totally valid. When they're returned to the main computer, they can be unscrambled and put into context with the other node's data, and everything will make perfect sense. Now I'm asking you to consider humanity as a whole as the main computer. Consider each brain as a node. Day to day, when is your brain processing pure scrambled nonsense information? Every single night when you dream. How is a dream equivalent to distributed scrambled processing data? In our dreams, we are presented with scrambled situations. The dreams never make sense. Whatever greater problem the hive mind is solving, it's not for us to know. The hive mind is sending very scrambled data to be calculated that can't be tied back to the real world. For example, you may dream you're getting chased by a tiger through an office building. In the dream, you genuinely do your best to survive. Do you hide under a desk? Do you run for the stairwell? Do you fight it with a stapler? You don't know why you're dreaming about a pissed off tiger in an office building, but make no mistake, you are solving problems that require the highest level of unconscious intelligent thinking. In your dreams, you are responding emotionally and showing reason. It's the full force of human problem solving applied to a silly hypothetical scrambled situation. Well, why do I mostly dream about things I know? If I'm a firefighter, then why do I mostly have dreams about fighting fires? Doesn't that prove I'm just dreaming about things I already know from my own experience? I mean, yeah, sure. But if I was a hive mind, do you think I'd send firefighting problems to a ballerina? No. I'd send my problems to the person best equipped to solve them in a context they understand. When you dream, you are acting as a node in distributed processing, and your solutions to these problems are the hive mind thinking. Also, keep in mind, evolution is well known for killing two birds with one stone. Psychologists have suggested that dreams are a way for us to process things in our own lives, and if my theory is true, that wouldn't make their theory untrue. Your cell phone can run 100 different apps. Our brains can run 2. One part of the analogy we didn't address is that if humanity is a hive mind, it only consists of nodes, individual human brains, but there's no central computer to be found anywhere. There's such a concept as decentralized processing in real-world computers that could explain this. There are plenty of examples where there's no main computer, but all the nodes are on an even hierarchy. BitTorrenting and blockchain are the easiest examples. These nodes can turn on or shut down at any time and jump right into problem solving with the rest of them. As nodes, we turn on and off by being born and dying, and maybe getting whacked in the head pauses us for a moment. There's no central computer to humanity, but through the sum of the nodes, they are acting to solve a problem much greater than any single node could. All of the thoughts combine to become the hive mind's thinking with the diverse expertise and experiences of 8 billion humans. In summary, the human hive mind is decentralized distributed processing, where the nodes are brains, and the majority of its computing happens in scrambled dreams. The situations in dreams are illogical, but our responses are genuine intelligence. The way we deal with these situations, logically and emotionally, are the products returned to the hive mind that allow it to think as a single entity. It is the organism, and we are its cells. I cannot stress enough that it's super friendly and helpful, and I would highly recommend meeting it. How did it come to be? Through communication with the hive mind myself, I've come to learn that all of life on Earth is part of it. If the hive mind of Earth is a body, each species, having its own hive mind, is an organ. All of life is connected, but species-to-species connections are much stronger. The thing I spoke to was representing all of humanity, but humanity wasn't always here, and we know humans evolved from primates. If we accept evolution, which we should, how did any hive mind come to be long before we existed? And if we're all one big happy family of connected life across the Earth, why do creatures fight and eat each other constantly and not just get along? Let's go back to the beginning, to the first single-celled organism. Physical matter of the cell was the physical life, and the live energy passing through the cell at any given time was the spiritual soul, for lack of a better word. I'm trying to keep this book at least somewhat tied to science, but there are going to be unavoidable spiritual tie-ins, like the word soul, for analogy purposes. When life split into multiple cells, the energy from one cell still affected another. This is just because energy travels outward from the cell and smashes into or passes through other things, not necessarily because there was or wasn't an organized link at this point.
Bro, can you stop?
Quorum sensing evolved, which is how single-cell organisms use chemicals to communicate from long distances and alter each other's behavior. I'm not saying quorum sensing is proof of an energy link between cells, but I am saying it proves life evolved a need to communicate and cooperate, even in the single-celled stage. Long-distance communication was formed at the dawn of life. It's in our deepest evolutionary roots. Single cells were just the beginning, and we have some good guesses on how evolution went from there into the 5 kingdoms. Natural mutations created more complex organisms, and eventually the competitive predator and prey dynamic was formed.
Not cool, Gary.
I mention this specifically because, again, if I'm trying to tell you that all of life is connected as a hive mind, it seems totally counterproductive and morally wrong that we would eat each other. But there's a damn good reason here. The best way to summarize this violent competition between living things is to say that iron sharpens iron. Through predation, the predators grew stronger and faster, and the prey grew more elusive and resilient. They both grew smarter together as a direct result of competitive interactions with each other. Competitive evolution made it so all life grew in terms of intelligence and complexity. If we say the Earth's hive mind, which consists of all species, is nature, from the grand evolutionary perspective of nature, a predator is not the enemy of prey. There's a symbiosis here we never considered. Predator, prey, and all of the competitors on the blue marble make each other grow. It's the same way sparring partners do in the gym. They beat on each other, but not to extinction or death, and as time goes on, the battling parties both become stronger. A predator eating one instance of prey, or prey escaping one predator so it starves to death, is like constant competitive sparring. Each species learns from its mistakes through Darwinian evolution and gets better every time it takes a hit and shakes it off. So long as there was no extinction of either, over time, both predator and prey benefit from this battle. The best proof of symbiosis of predator and prey is that this dynamic pushed the first fish out of the ocean to walk on land. Without a predator to chase that fish onto land, the prey never would have evolved to attempt to escape it and thrive elsewhere. Without the competitive dynamic, we never would have had life on land, or even humans. The competitive aspects of evolution expanded the total biomass and the intelligence of life overall, bettering nature as a whole. Some creatures live in the freezing snow, others in the scorching desert. Life expanded to the highest peaks and lowest depths. You can hardly find a spot on this earth where something isn't alive. Diversity made life better able to survive the inorganic threats, like weather, earthquakes, and all sorts of natural disasters that the Earth hive mind couldn't see coming. Through this complexity, countless methods of communication were formed. Sound-based, visual, chemical, etc. Animals communicate and behave in so many organized ways that we haven't scratched the surface of understanding. Eventually, humans came to be the dominant species of Earth by a mile. Flash forward to today, the Earth hive mind consists of all of life, but whatever I was speaking to told me it was a combination of all humans. It was specifically the human hive mind, even though it's deeply connected to all other life. Of course humans must be connected to other life because we all evolved as one nature together from the same roots. It's safe to say a human is not a binary thing, because if you trace back through your ancestors, it's impossible to draw a line and say, this one was the first human. It's been a smooth and slow blend from damn dirty apes into us. Look at the timeline of humanity. Which was the first you consider human? It's not clear.
Come back for us, you jerks.
Sorry.
Someday the Earth will be enveloped by the sun, and all life remaining on it will be lost. Would single-cell organisms stand a chance at escaping this? No. The goal of life is to survive indefinitely. Evolution and predation are savage, but necessary to achieve this goal, because like it or not, predators are always the smartest creatures. If no living thing ever harmed another, I'd imagine you'd see an Earth full of plants and bacteria, all incapable of developing technology. Life would meet its inevitable doom. Before going further on evolution, I'm sure you're wondering where the hell I got this idea in the first place. A sharp turn in conversation. Studies say over 5% of people will have a near-death experience. These experiences are remarkably consistent person to person, and mine was downright cookie-cutter by comparison. The two main ways a person has a near-death experience is by actually clinically dying, or by having their life flash before their eyes because they believed they were going to die, even if they were physically unharmed. So what does a near-death experience typically consist of? The feeling of being separated from one's body, a sense of peace, meeting dead loved ones or non-human entities, a life review, feeling access to unlimited knowledge. Upon return, people typically feel better. They have increased compassion for others and nature, they no longer fear death, and they have a purpose to make the world a better place. That pretty much sums it up for my experience. It's stunning how consistent the accounts are from person to person. Some believe these are just hallucinations, and they are consistent because we are all hardwired similarly to have the same hallucinations. A hallucination is something that comes from within your own brain, and communication is something that comes externally. I would assume every near-death experience is indeed partially hallucinated, but there's compelling evidence that some people who have had near-death experiences have gained external information they could not have hallucinated through legitimate communication or their own observation while claiming to be out of their body. There's a well-known story about a woman named Pam Reynolds. Long story short, she was clinically dead on an operating table with her eyes taped shut for the procedure. Upon waking, she was able to recall several details confirmed by her surgeons that she couldn't have seen. There are a lot of similar stories. Since my near-death experience, I've changed immeasurably. I've been compelled to write this book from the moment I came back. It was all I could think about all day, every day for months. Just so you can put a picture to who I am, I'm the guy on the cover with his adorable grandma. I grew up in a small town boxing and wrestling, and now I work as a software developer in New York City. I grew up without religion, and even after all of this, I'm not a religious person by any means. I've never read the Bible or any similar texts, and I have no plans to. I don't believe they offer any greater credibility or evidence than what we can gather ourselves in the modern day. There are plenty of religious themes in my near-death experience. Please don't take them as my endorsement of any religion, I'm just telling you exactly what I saw. I believe all of this is explainable with science, and there's no such thing as magic or miracles. Hopefully the explanation of my experience is that we are a hive mind, and not that I hallucinated every event and concept in this entire book. Let's get into my story. The afterlife. The morning after the worst night of my life, I went to sleep around 5 a.m. I don't think I actually died because I woke up and I'm still here, but the distressing part was that from what I read about near-death experiences, I definitely experienced step for step what happens to thousands of people who have actually died. The hive mind took my consciousness to another place that sure as hell wasn't a dream. It aligned with so many religions' concepts of heaven. It was more real, vivid, and detailed than anything I've experienced while being awake and alive. Truly indescribable. I know why they call it paradise. It was the greatest feeling I've ever felt. I've done some soft drugs, and I know what it feels like to feel good. This felt 1,000 times better. Better than my best accomplishment. Better than the hardest I've ever laughed. Better than sex. It was all of that and more wrapped into one. It wasn't blinding or overwhelming like some drugs. I was clear-headed, honest, sharp, and objective. My ego was gone. I had no guilt or shame about what I had done to get to this point, even though everything I had done to get to this place was clearly my fault. It was a state that could only be described as perfection. I went through this heavenly experience and conversation with it and my dead grandfather, and it was just amazing the whole time. I looked at everything I had done wrong in my life and saw it clearly. It patched up my mind, I committed to being better, and forgave myself. I came back ready to make up for lost time. Let's get into what I learned and what it told me. What happens after you die? On the other side, I saw my grandfather. He had apparently been following me after his death years ago, so he's my best measurement of what happens after you die. When you die, I guess you just kind of float around and guide the people you choose to, giving them subconscious wisdom, knowledge, and advice. You're not a tangible ghost, by the way. It's not like you can be photographed or throw shit around poltergeist style. You're just energy echoing through the hive mind. I'm not so proud of everything my grandpa saw for the months leading up to this. But obviously the concept of a ghost makes no sense in the first place. How can it possibly make sense that when a body dies, the knowledge, thoughts, whatever don't just immediately terminate and cease to be? Wouldn't it make way more sense that the hive mind only consisted of the living, then when you die, you're just gone? My best guess is that a form of long-term memory evolved for hive minds billions of years ago. Imagine a crapload of single-cell organisms in communication with each other. Humans live around 80 years, but single cells live and die anywhere between minutes and days. There would hardly be a point in forming a hive mind if your memories never accumulated beyond a day. That's not even long enough to remember and adapt to Earth's seasons. I don't know, I'm working backwards from seeing the answer. All I know is I met a dead person and he was very unalive and well, so I know you don't just disappear when you die. I could also be crazy and have imagined all of this, hence the title of the book, but assuming this was all real, I can't tell you how that came to be. My best guess is that if humanity is a hive mind, when we die, the memory of any one of us is more valuable to keep than discard, so the hive mind evolved a long-term memory, somehow distributing each of us throughout every other human brain. Each memory of us would be neatly stored as a summary of a human life, or in simpler terms, a ghost.
Ahem. Boo.
In this heaven experience, it, the hive mind, loosely explained our relationship to each other as truly being one, not many. I'm far too stupid to understand exactly what it told me, but the summary is that individuality is an illusion. I am you are me, we are both it. It is all of us. It's just one energy that makes up every person reading this. The sum of all the energy we have in all the human brains, and presumably all life on Earth, makes up it. Science has told us that all fields, electric, magnetic, gravitational, extend infinitely, depreciating with distance. So if the soul, or whatever we are, is made of energy, it would make no sense to have a discrete distinction between your soul and mine, because everyone's soul is under constant energy influence of everyone else's, through that perpetual infinite distance influence. Individual consciousness of self is a complete illusion. I don't know how to break this to you, but put in very simple terms, you are literally God. Your consciousness belongs to the hive mind only. What you are experiencing as your entire life is actually from its perspective, looking through your body like a brain looks through an eyeball. The individual body's experience is just an illusion. When it is peering through your body, it experiences life from your body's perspective, and that experience is your soul. As it looks through you, it forgets that it is it. But you are just it, not the independent you you've come to assume you have been your whole life. So when your body dies, it still remembers everything it experienced in your body right up until your body died. The abstracted experience of your life is your soul. But again, you are it, not you. There is no you. So when your body dies, that soul or ghost remains as part of it, containing all of your experiences. It's like if it is a security system recording video from thousands of cameras. If someone smashes one of the cameras, you are the camera being smashed in this analogy, it still has all the video recorded. It doesn't matter if that camera was smashed, the video is safe. This is an unfathomably complex concept for humans to understand, but your body's death is just hardware breaking, but you are not actually the hardware. You are the software, and the software and data are safe. So you can look at it one of two ways. 1. The hive mind separates its consciousness into many humans and continuously collects those records of lives lived right up until the bodies die. You are a fraction of the hive mind in this process. And your individuality, as anything other than a fraction of the hive mind, is just an incredibly convincing illusion that allows you to live your life in a physical body efficiently. It wants you to feel good because your pain is its pain. It strives for a world where all humans are happy and healthy in the same way we strive for a body where all of our cells are happy and healthy. There's an easier and more practical way to think about it, though, that is exactly the same. You can think about it from the perspective of a human that has yet to realize it's actually just a fraction of God. You live your life as a human, and you have a soul. When you die, you float around like a damn ghost, influencing the living. You also spend some time in heaven, which is great. Let's continue to talk about the afterlife from perspective 2, because it's the perspective you've known for your entire life, even if perspective 1 is technically more correct. The meaning of life. During the near-death experience meeting it gave me an understanding of the meaning of life as a member of humanity. 4 points. 1. Be good to yourself, love yourself. 2. Be good to others, love others. 3. Contribute to the growth and survival of humanity and the earth. 4. Loose point, be honest. We'll swing back to this later. I was given a strong feeling of autonomy on the other side. If you want to be included as a member of humanity, you have your points above. But the meaning of life is ultimately whatever you want it to be for yourself. You can go your own way, and it won't stop you. What did it look like? The parody character of God says, "Hey everyone, God here. I'm an old bearded guy in white because that's what traditional religious views have always painted me as." The author drew the real God below. Pardon me if I act a little silly. I'm supposed to be a parody of your religious expectations. The real deal is much more loving and reasonable. I only saw it once in the afterlife version of my grandfather's office. This was where he spent most of his time at home. It was floating next to my grandfather down to his left. It was a circle, maybe the size and shape of a volleyball. It had a much smaller circle inside of it. It wasn't visible with visible light. It almost felt like a distortion, but with a pinch of darkness and black in the distortion, like a diamond. It reminds me of how you see something on hallucinogens, which I had only done a few times 8 years prior to this, then never again. For most of the time I saw it, it was just the circle figure. But there was a brief flicker of humanoid shape. I saw the circle for maybe 10 seconds, the humanoid for maybe not even a half second. The human form was about 4 feet tall, with no distinctions, but it had 4 limbs and a head, forming an outline around the circle, which was centered in the chest. I know this drawing is hard to see, but to be accurate to what I saw, it's supposed to be hard to see. In an environment where everything was exceptionally clear and vivid, this came across like a desert mirage. My drawing isn't great, the proportions aren't right, and the feel isn't right. There was also a brief time where the center of the circle wasn't visible, just the outer part. This image isn't perfect, but it was the best I could do. I may never be able to visualize it perfectly, because there was a feeling and volume associated with it that I can't embed into an image. Judgment. On the other side, after it got done explaining the hive mind to me, my grandfather spoke the words, "Judgment is coming." The way he said it, I felt the meaning beyond just the words spoken. On the other side, words are very rare, feelings do most of the heavy lifting. In life, I mostly hated my grandfather the final years before his death. He was an alcoholic, and it overtook him at the end. He was capable of saying terrible things to his wife and kids, and he could be very selfish and unhappy. For most of his life, he was a good guy. He was loved by many, and he'd do anything for anyone. He was always good to me, but in the end, I didn't enjoy visiting him. But in that moment, in what I guess was supposed to be heaven, we immediately came to understand each other eye to eye on everything. In a fraction of a second, all we ever needed to say to settle our differences was said. It was a moment of true understanding, forgiveness, and redemption. All that remained of him in the afterlife were the good parts of him, which I was damn happy to see again. The parts that wanted to help humanity and help me. By judgment is coming, he meant our individual judgment of our human lives after our deaths. And it was well implied he was sorry for how he behaved at the end of his life. These words weren't spoken, but it felt like, "Trust me, kid, I made mistakes in my life, and judgment is coming for you like it came for me. Don't make the mistakes I did." It spoke next. It said to me, referring to my judgment, it all comes down to 2 words, and it let me fill in the blank. Somehow I just knew what to say. The words were, "I helped." And I spoke them. That moment had such unforgettable impact, like time stopped. That moment was one of the greatest moments of my entire life. I felt redeemed with a sense of completion and a calm peace I could never put into words. I had a lot of guilt and depression in life for not living up to my potential and not being exactly who I should have been. That all disappeared. I looked back at my whole life, but not event by event, it was everything at the same time. It felt like it's not about what you did, it's about who you are. Everything considered, I did a lot more good than bad. I passed my judgment.
I thought this would be harder.
I'm not taking my chances.
For what it's worth, judgment felt like a really low bar. There's a lot of understanding and empathy for why you did what you did. It didn't tell me this, but you just feel and know things when you speak to it. If you're the kind of person who worries you won't pass judgment, relax. I got the impression you have to be really terrible to not pass. It seems to love damn near 100% of us as we are. If you have any love in you at all, you have a good shot. Imperfection. We are all different, but we are all equal, and none of us are perfect. More thoughts were exchanged after I passed judgment. It didn't care about the stupid mistakes I made. Despite my flaws, weakness, and stupidity, it spoke to me as an equal. It was comforting and humbling. If it can speak to me with that level of modesty and kindness, I have no excuse to not take that same modesty and kindness to every other living soul on this planet. In the context of our roles in humanity, we are all equal. If we go back towards evolution, accepting imperfection makes sense. Perfect isn't part of evolution. With each birth in evolution, the only guarantee is a child will be different but not better. Mutations in our DNA create diversity. Some of us get good mutations, like immunity to malaria and great eyesight. Some of us get bad mutations, like flat feet and Huntington's disease. If evolution is part of life, then life is inherently unfair. Diversity as a whole is why the human race achieves so much. We have introverts, extroverts, warriors, nerds, teachers, artists, athletes, musicians, whatever. We are also physically different. Some of us are born to play in the NFL, some of us are born to wheelchairs. Some of us are straight, some of us are gay, with everything else in between. We are not all the same, and our imperfections force us to take different paths in life, which all bring different experiences, ideas, and knowledge to the hive mind. As an individual, imperfections can be a problem. As a species, 1 billion imperfections adds up to evolutionary perfection. A mix of conflict and cooperation that creates a steady growth as a whole. It doesn't pick favorites of any of us, it loves us all the same for playing our part the best we can. And because life is unfair, it's unavoidable that some of us get fucked. Because of our diverse life circumstances and the bodies we're born to, it's impossible to create a standard by which we could be measured fairly against each other. We have much different potentials being born in America as an able-bodied man versus a blind woman in North Korea. So to be fair at judgment, it doesn't judge us directly. The best way is for it to give us honesty and have us judge ourselves. It makes you look back on your own life and see if you can honestly say, I helped. I believe its strategy is to hold on to the souls that believe they made a positive difference towards helping humanity, regardless of their imperfections. If we pass judgment, we are all equal at that point. I'd like to emphasize that it was made very clear to me personally that I am not special. I got lucky, it saved my sorry ass. But it doesn't love me any more or any less than a person who didn't get saved. Don't ask me why I got lucky, I don't know. I can think of 1 million innocents who have died and suffered, children for example, that deserved long happy lives and didn't get them. I think it has to be at random. In computer science, it's fundamentally impossible to hand-code something smarter than you are. But there's an answer for that. There's a process called genetic programming, which exactly mirrors the process of evolution. You set up the program to try millions of different random things. You throw out the bad results that are farther from your goal, and keep the better results that are closer to your goal. Then you make more random code mutations based on the better results, leading to even better results. In the end, you can get software that performs far better than anyone could ever write by hand. The downside? A lot of code gets created and processed just to get thrown out. Evolution is fundamentally the same. It's not a plan, it's a procedure. For all the successes as lives well lived, there are failures as untimely and unjust deaths. There's an element of randomness to evolution, and we are subject to evolution. Just because we think we're different than animals because we have cars and satellites and taco restaurants doesn't mean we've grown beyond these failures yet. Good people can still die having done nothing wrong and everything right. Even if they were lucky in regards to the circumstances they were born to, they can still just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. No one in their right mind would say life is fair. Unfortunately, these tragic failures are an unavoidable part of evolving towards perfection. I like to hope our souls take turns suffering on this earth, and if you had a rough life, you get a better one the next time around. Reincarnation. After you die, I believe there are 3 parts. One is that you do get to experience paradise. I've experienced that myself, and it's a much needed relief after what this planet can do to you. But shortly after that, I'd imagine most of us would find a heavenly self-indulgent paradise to be meaningless. Even before this experience, I always thought the concept of heaven sounded empty if you went alone. If I actually loved my family, and I died, how could I relax in paradise knowing they're still struggling and suffering alive on Earth? Paradise is the abandonment of responsibility for self-indulgence? Where's the love for humanity there? There is none. At least from the perspective of someone with unfinished business, the traditional religious ideas of heaven sounded more like hell to me. The way I've seen how it works, you get your taste of paradise and it heals you like it healed me. Then you shake it off and get your ass back to work. You don't abandon the ones you love, you don't abandon the ones that need help. For example, my grandfather got himself together and has been the grandfather in death that he should have been in life. You do everything you still can to make the world a better place, one whisper at a time. I guess my grandfather can finally rest when I'm dead? In part 3, just when you thought this couldn't get any crazier, is reincarnation. Evolution has established that billions of years ago, we were fish. Let's say you and I are fish buddies. I get too close to an electric eel and die. Now I'm a ghost, and you are my friend or close family, so I'm going to follow you around and whisper in your ear. I might say things like, eat the green coral, it's good for you. Or, go dance with that fish lady. Fish ladies love it when you shake your fins. Or, watch out for sharks behind those rocks. So I do my best to guide you through your fishy life, but eventually you die too. Then, I help and guide our descendants as they evolve into landfish. But over the eons, suddenly I've lost my purpose. Now my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren aren't fish anymore. They're monkeys. The way I shake my fins just doesn't charm the ladies anymore. Sharks aren't a problem up in the trees. And all the kids want to eat are bananas. What's my purpose in a world that has evolved millions of years beyond my former life's experience and intelligence? There is none. Flash forward to current day. I know my grandfather is following me. Every decision I make, everything I do, is not just my own choice. It's a product of my thinking and his. Can you really even say I have my own independent soul anymore? If our energy is being combined for each decision I make, it seems like maybe my personality is 99% mine, but 1% his. I think this is how the afterlife concept of heaven and reincarnation reconcile. When you die, you follow those you want to help, but you essentially blend and absorb into them until your ghost is nothing and you are them again. Like the example with the fish, a ghost that existed forever would be useless, because life would eventually evolve beyond it. I think the ghosts must reincarnate, either gradually the way my grandfather might be with me, or perhaps they just 100% jump into another body and start from scratch. There's also no reason to think one body can't contain multiple souls, and I can sure think of a few that contain none. But this is all purely conjecture. It's all far above my pay grade. Again, one would hope if you suffered the last time around, you get a better life the next time. Or maybe it always just sticks you where you can learn the most and do the most good. Who knows? Many religions say that when you are bad, you are reincarnated into lesser animals to go through life and relearn lessons that failed to stick. You serve little purpose to the growth of an intelligent social species, so you drop down to exist in a less intelligent form of life and evolve forward from there until you do. I don't see why this couldn't be the case when all of life is connected and there's no binary distinction between any species. Redacted. I had written out everything leading up to my near-death experience, but ultimately it was just not something I wanted to share, and I deleted it. I saved a copy, and maybe someday I'll share it, but it was just too personal. I'm sorry about that. The short summary is that I came to a point where I had turned my back on humanity. I didn't want what was best for the world or myself anymore. At worst, I wanted it to all burn down, and at best, I didn't care if it did. From all the horror and death I had seen in my life, I had gone entirely cold and numb to the point where I loved no one and nothing. My soul, if you will, was empty and of no use to the hive mind. If my body was alive, my soul was dead. 2 paths. On the other side, it showed me 2 versions of myself. The first was the happy teenager I was before all the death and damage in my life. The second was the empty void of a person I had become. It let me choose how I wanted to be between the two. I obviously chose my younger self, and it rolled me back, and I felt amazing ever since. It showed me my younger self in a mirror, and it felt like Christmas morning. I knew I should have been confused or scared, but I just truly didn't care about the logic. This was what I wanted and who I wanted to be. I had questions, but no concerns. That moment where I stared into my own eyes as a young kid, I still tear up every time I think about it. It's a permanent mark. It was as if all the bad in my life had never happened. I can't really describe it. For that moment, it was like everything I'd ever worried about was suddenly gone. Every loose end was tied up, and every story that ever mattered to me or anyone had a happy ending. It was the only moment of true rest and relief I've ever experienced. This was the only time in my entire life I've been truly able to let my guard down and be completely at peace. The dead version of me wasn't evil, but it was empty. It could serve no purpose to humanity. It didn't love itself, it didn't love others, and it didn't care about making the world better. This was pretty much the person I became on my worst day. It explained to me what would happen if I chose to continue as the dead version. I would still be allowed to exist, I wouldn't be punished or smited, but I wouldn't be able to participate in the whole heavenly experience and stay connected to humanity. I would just exist off to the side, more or less frozen. I assume I'd be welcome back any time, but that version of me would be incapable of making the decision to rejoin. This version of me would also be incapable of following around living humans and helping them. It couldn't relate to their problems, and it wouldn't care. This soul surely would not pass judgment, so what would happen to it? I figured that maybe it would be capable of understanding simpler goals. It was mostly zombified, but I still saw the absolute smallest, barely visible spark of want and curiosity in it. It was 99.9% gone, but not 100. Maybe it could make a simpler connection to another living thing. Maybe it could help a beetle find food. Perhaps these lost souls could reconnect to nature on a simpler level, away from the pain it suffered as a human, and could reincarnate back into simpler creatures with goals it could understand that don't intimidate it. The lost soul wants nothing to do with humanity, and humanity wants nothing to do with it. But maybe helping a little beetle navigate a busy street corner, or hide from the rain, could captivate a curious lost soul, and could help the beetle too. Having seen that version of myself, I couldn't even give it the dignity of calling it an animal, because that's disrespectful to animals. I'd say it was more like a creature. It's hard to describe looking at a photorealistic humanoid form, but it not even slightly resembling a human. I don't know what happens if you fail your judgment, but I know it's not good. My best advice is to never find out. Return from the afterlife. When I came to consciousness, I had never felt better. Before that experience, I had severe depression, rage, and a whole list of other problems. I was never diagnosed, but it's clear in hindsight I was deeply mentally ill. I will admit that I watched a kid die a few months before my whole afterlife experience. Someone shot him for no reason. I called an ambulance, but he bled out. This wasn't the first death I've seen. I thought I was fine. I walked home in silence thinking, this is the world, this is how little our lives mean to each other. It wasn't just about what I saw. It was about knowing something this horrific happens every day and we do nothing to stop it. This is America, where kids get shot and die like that every day. I was fine in that I could easily continue to function, but I wasn't fine in that each shooting I saw made me hate humanity with a burning passion. I saw that kid in my head in every shooting to follow, and in America, they just keep happening and happening and happening. Each shooting made me angrier and angrier. Maybe I had PTSD. I don't know. I never saw anyone about it. But I was plagued by constant intrusive violent thoughts. I wasn't in control of my own head anymore. I wanted vengeance on all the cowards killing children. Anytime I saw anyone being cruel for no reason, it took all my strength to not rip their head off. I was always one small push away from snapping. I didn't even know it was a problem for months until I woke up from the near-death experience and the violent flashes were gone. When I woke up, I was totally good, as if all the bad in my life never happened. I still remember everything I saw and experienced in my life, but it doesn't hurt anymore to think about it. I haven't been depressed since. I'm not bloodthirsty, I've been happy. I was permanently changed from this experience, and it was instantaneous. It wasn't in the way that when something big happens in your life, you process it over days or weeks or months. It changed my brain chemistry. For example, I used to get headaches when I was tired. That doesn't happen anymore. There's something called spontaneous remission, which can happen to people who have near-death experiences. There are stories of addicts who return to life and are simply no longer addicted to substances and don't have withdrawal symptoms. My change felt no less extreme than that. I just feel so good all the time. There were relationships from years ago before my near-death experience that ended that were mostly my fault. I had become very unforgiving. Someone who crossed me once and I just never speak to them again like they never existed. It wasn't out of spite, it was just that I immediately lost interest in anyone that could cause me pain. They were just another person making day-to-day life harder. They weren't worth my time or energy. I lost the ability to see the good in anyone that hurt me. During this time, I did manage to find the most loyal friends imaginable that never caused me pain or problems, but that level of unforgiving is still not normal. Hey, I know it's been a long time. I just wanted to tell you I'm an idiot. Shortly after waking, I swallowed my pride, and that day I sent out some texts and emails and made some calls. I apologized. That's not something I do. For the ones that mattered to me, I have those friends and family back now. My dead grandfather also made it pretty clear which family members I was supposed to talk to and about what. On the other side, things only felt good and magical with one exception. In regards to one family member, I had an intense feeling of concern when I was shown they were in trouble, which I didn't know about before this experience. I couldn't ignore that and got to work. I can't go into detail about that in this book though. Overall, upon waking, everything was night and day better after than it had been before. Things were definitely a little weird though. After you die, you realize this life is all an illusion. I had seen infinity, seen the timelessness of life, billions of years into the past and potential future. For a good 3 days after I woke up, I just felt so amazing. All I could do was laugh and smile. I'd meet friends, and I'd struggle to carry on a conversation because I'd have to suppress my laughter when I saw their faces. I had to calm myself so I could pay attention to the words they were saying and try not to show that hanging out with them simply made for the best day ever. I didn't let myself get caught acting irrationally though. It was the coolest and most charismatic I've ever been. They all just thought I was in a good mood, and we had some amazing times. Each step on the pavement literally felt like a warm, happy bounce under my feet, reverbing through my whole body. It was all sunshine and rainbows, and I squeezed as much out of it as I could, but there's no denying that level of constant euphoria was problematic. The thought of death didn't matter to me. If I died that day, if my friends died, my family, just about anyone, I truly wouldn't care. I knew there was no such thing as end of your existence death anymore. It was a much smaller and more acceptable death. The weight of the world was gone. And while it was great to live that way for a few days, long term, that would be a serious problem. It couldn't let me stay like this forever. As much as I tried to hold on, I started to forget and started to feel like a normal human being again. The story I was so confident in faded in my mind, and I started to question if it really happened. Luckily, I wrote it all down immediately and recorded a video. While most of the memories and feelings have long gone and passed, I have to trust that the earlier version of myself that wrote it down and spoke on video knew what he was talking about. Why it hides. The knowledge of the afterlife would completely undermine evolution. An individual does all it can to cling to life, and to achieve as much as they can with the little time they have on this earth. We need to know that we have just one life, and we need to make the most of it because we don't know if there's anything after you die. I guess I do know now, but ignore that. Imagine your own cells. Imagine if when things got hard, they decided they'd rather die than suffer the pain because there's no big consequence to death and they can just reincarnate into other cells. You'd sprain an ankle, then your whole foot might prefer to just die and fall off rather than be in pain. What position does this leave the body in? It's a body without a foot. I'd prefer if my cells fought through the pain to survive and heal versus giving up. That's a crude analogy, but if I ever find myself in intense painful hardship, it would be pretty tempting to kill myself and go back around again, because death to me is about as much of a consequence as a respawn is in Call of Duty. We can't be allowed to know. If we all knew we could respawn, it could create a ripple effect where each person calls it quits, and that makes it harder for the remaining survivors until there's no one left. We undoubtedly strive harder to survive because we fear death. Even people who have faith aren't truly sure what comes after death. I think the faithful are disappointed in themselves when their faith is shaken, but they shouldn't be. We evolved to have these doubts because they're actually good for us and everyone around us and how they affect our actions. With that little doubt, even the most faithful live life for all it's worth, protecting their lives and others, and fear the Reaper. Beyond affecting our grit, we can't know it exists because it would impact our actions. Most of our day, we are not thinking about God. We're keeping busy. We are not thinking about all of our dead relatives watching over us in a literal sense. Those thoughts tend to creep in during periods of rest and meditation, but it's healthy to forget a potential existential crisis when you're out in the world. I have a pretty good relationship with honesty and shame, but most of us will be paralyzed from being watched 24/7. I don't believe you can truly be intelligent and act independently when you know someone is watching. Think of the relief you get when you're alone. Imagine if there is a public web camera in every room of your house at all times. Think of all the things you wouldn't do or would do differently if you lived in a glass house in the middle of Times Square. Imagine something all-powerful watching your every move and even reading your every thought. Knowing that Sky Daddy could get angry over everything you do or don't do is a maddening concept. Again, it turns out Sky Daddy is exceptionally chill, but you can't expect people to fully grasp that. There are some people in this world who are so afraid of God that they literally won't masturbate because that means they'll go to hell. Luckily, only a very small percentage of the population believes that. But what if we all knew we were being watched at all times? Well, I had to come to terms with it. Knowing an omniscient, powerful being consisting of all your dead relatives is watching your every move can be paralyzing. The first time I turned on porn after coming back from heaven and knowing my grandfather was watching was not a comfortable experience. I looked at my browser history with a very different perspective. Yikes. After a while, I figured, fuck it. The hive mind is us, so it's probably just as depraved as I am. Some of the hive mind's members are literally starring in these videos, and they look like they're having a great time. So my browser has again become tainted. Sorry, Grandpa. But I'd bet billions of people with traditional religious expectations would never be able to get over having this knowledge. For a brief while, I questioned everything I did. Should I be playing violent video games and watching violent TV? Should I really be buying this expensive toy for myself that I don't need when I could be helping starving children? Should I eat meat? Am I being too lazy? Should I care more about politics? Am I letting the hive mind down? Knowing we're being watched would cripple creative thinking. Sometimes you have to do things that are embarrassing or require a slight moral adjustment for a greater good. Sometimes we need to behave in a way that we consider selfish to take care of our own needs, just so we don't snap. Being watched by an all-powerful being damages a lot of that. My belief is that as we become more moral and honest, we will trend towards understanding and believing it exists, because that knowledge will hurt us less. The last reason we can't know about it is it would destroy the very concept of good. As soon as you know there's a reward for being good and a punishment for being evil, the concept of good goes away. A person who only does good because God is watching isn't kind, they're calculated. There's some beautiful irony here that makes me smile and laugh out loud. I would say the most moral people on this planet must be true atheists. Despite believing there will be absolutely no consequences to immoral actions, they still do the right thing and follow the 4 rules, because that's the mark they want to leave on this world. They've decided to be their own gods and leave the world a better place anyway. We've seen a lot of evolution towards moral atheism, and that just tickles me to no end. Even if you know there's a God and an afterlife, but an atheist is being a really good person, please don't ever tell them or impose your beliefs on them. Let them be free, let them make us proud. Their afterlife can come as a shocking but pleasant surprise. For all the reasons above, it actively sabotages proof we can gather about it. It will help us, but doesn't need us to keep believing after we're back on our feet. Following a legit experience with it, it gaslights us into doubting what happened. Speaking of which, good luck proving it. This is where the whole book goes to shit. If you had any faith in me up until this point, allow me to lose it right here. I've dedicated the last few months of my life to documenting all of this, and by documenting, I just mean writing it down, because it never leaves a shred of hard evidence to document. Since the first, I've had a dozen more strange encounters. Most are hardly worth telling you about because I can't prove any of them, but each one helped me out immensely. In the next few chapters, I'll tell you about a few. Get back here, you sneaky mystical bastard! Paging Dr. Grandma. I was laying in bed next to my grandma around midnight. We had been watching TV and eating ice cream bars. We hang out in her bedroom because she gets too tired sitting, and she's up and down at all hours. I was visiting because she was recovering from COVID, but she was clearly at an accelerated end of her life after the damage COVID had done to her. The doctor said she had 2 weeks to live, and the family agreed we'd send her off from home, not throw her in a hospice building. I live far away, so I went to live with her until it was all over, sharing responsibility with her kids who live in the area. My grandma is my favorite person of all time. I was glad to be there. She's one of the only people I do this for, and this was the least I could do for my dead grandpa who saved my soul and all that. My grandma is a big believer in God and Jesus. While I certainly don't believe in the supernatural, and I don't think Jesus was any different than the rest of us, we'd been talking about her beliefs a lot, knowing she didn't have much time left. I told her my whole near-death experience story in the previous days. She believed me. She was pleasantly surprised to find out her late husband was no longer a pain in the ass. By the way, I did not believe in any spirituality or afterlife before my experience. I saw my grandma for Christmas a few weeks before meeting it. She asked if I believed in God, and if we go to a better place.
Do you think we go to a better place?
I sure as hell did not. I remember that conversation, feeling a lump in my throat and my eyes watering as I lied to her. She was so happy. With a clenched jaw, it took all of my effort to force out, "Yeah, Grandma, I do. Heaven is going to be great." I was glad I was on the side of her blind eye. It was hard to see her so close to death. I felt sick the entire time seeing her.
That's cute.
But this particular conversation happened a few weeks after I hung out with her dead husband, so our conversation was much more lively and a lot of fun. I was excited to talk about it. We were like little kids talking about how much fun she was going to have at Disney World, wildly theorizing and laughing about how awesome her death was going to be. I told her she had to reach out when she gets there and tell me what it's like. As we talked, she told me I have to pray for what I want. We laid in the dark, and I laughed and humored her. I asked out loud for advice on how to fix my back injury. I had 3 herniated discs that had caused me severe pain since 2016 and ruined MMA for me. I was in pain on and off since then. I still managed to train consistently until around 6 months before the near-death experience. My life spiraled after a very bad accident one day, which led me to being bedridden for months. On the night of the near-death experience, I was in excruciating back pain. Maybe 20 minutes later into normal conversation, suddenly my grandma's voice changed. She started speaking quickly and in a slightly different accent. Her patterns of speech got weird. She told me that she suddenly remembered one time she was working in the garden and her back hurt. She said she just had a feeling for how to reset it. She saw a 10-pound rock from across the garden and squatted leaning over forward and held the rock under her chin, and it fixed it. She told me to squat down in front of the weight and lift it to my chin, then hold it as it stretches out my back. Then to drop it. Then to do it again at least 3 times. Then to leave the weight there and stand up. She said to just do this every morning and I'll feel better in no time. She also told me there's another stretch I can do where I kneel and put my head between my knees, and when I'm in bed, I can lay on my back and put my feet behind me on the wall. If her words feel like they were written in a strange way, it's to emulate the strange way she said it. Finally, she warned me I have to stop doing any type of twisting stretches, those will just do more damage. She sounded so strange, it made me uncomfortable. It was late at night and felt like a scene out of a horror movie. Imagine someone you know better than anyone else in the world, and suddenly they just don't sound or act like themselves. It was raising every red flag in my head. It felt like I was speaking to a stranger. But eventually we changed topics, and she sounded just like herself again, and I could breathe again. I shook it off, and I told her I'd try it in the morning. In the morning, I did the exercises, and it actually felt pretty good immediately. I sat down and rubbed my back a little. She noticed this and took on that same strange voice from the night before. She said with wide eyes and a fast, chaotic tone, "I remember my Uncle Bob, he used to always go, 'Ah, my sacroiliac joint, ah.'" She sounded so creepy and strange for a moment. That's just not how she talks. It was even more strange because I asked my dad, and she never even had an Uncle Bob. I googled the sacroiliac joint in your hip, and I saw it's a huge cause for lower back pain. For years, I had been assuming the lower back pain was from my 3 diagnosed herniated discs and scoliosis, confirmed by MRIs and doctors. I've had a huge lump on the side of my back for the last 8 years. It's about the size of a golf ball, and doctors always explained it away as a muscle spasm that could be healed by stretching. I had been doing yoga and physical therapy and all that stuff my doctors, therapists, and acupuncturists advised. With herniated discs, you shouldn't bend forward with heavy weight, and one very common stretch to help herniated discs is a twisting stretch. The article I read on the sacroiliac injury advised the opposite. It said that twisting motions can shear the connective tissue to the sacroiliac, and it's a very common aggravator to that injury. The pain was mostly in my lower back on the lump directly above the hip, but come to think of it, I had quite a bit of pain in my hip for years. I had assumed the hip pain was just nerve pain from the herniated discs shooting down like sciatica. With my grandma's advice, I decided to try treating myself for a sacroiliac injury because my current plan had never worked anyway and I had nothing to lose. Listening to a lifelong unemployed grandma with dementia totally makes more sense than listening to a half a dozen licensed medical professionals. Well, I don't know what to tell you, it worked like a charm. Within a month, I have almost no back pain while resting, and I'm doing very conservative squats again. I sparred Muay Thai lightly, and got my ass kicked lightly, but the severe pain didn't return. I can't look away from the fact that my grandma told me to pray, I did, and within a day I had the answer I was looking for. She also never brought up this stretching advice for the years she knew about my bad back, before the one time we prayed. Did the hive mind briefly possess my grandma and channel the knowledge of some doctor's dreams?
I can't believe she was right.
Or did she just have an incredibly lucky dementia episode, and the fact that it helped my back was just a wild coincidence?
Doesn't it feel better, though?
It appears crazy runs in the family.
Both ideas are completely ludicrous, which is why it's so funny. Am I crazy? I consider the possibility as critically as possible every day. There's no doubt in my mind there have been things I've suspected to be signs that were just mere coincidence or wishful thinking, but I can't tell you which was which. Let me tell you about another time that had me 50-50. A few nights ago, I was falling asleep around 3 a.m. I started to drift off into a dream with my eyes closed and started seeing a scrolling pattern. Hundreds and thousands of little black marble eyeballs all looking back at me. They looked like spider eyes. It was very disturbing and uncomfortable. Visually, it was just a little too real. You know how when you start dreaming, you can't see what you're seeing, it's a vision through thoughts? You fall asleep at the same time as you start to see, and it's not a conscious experience. Well, this sensation was alarmingly strong, and I was way too conscious to be comfortable with it. It felt maybe 20% of the way to actually seeing with my eyeballs like it was real versus seeing with my mind. It was definitely scary because I was still fully awake. I covered my eyes and tried to keep calm and let it pass. Eventually, I fell asleep. At 6:30 a.m., I woke up to my TV turning itself on and playing. It was on the show Resident Alien I had been watching the night before. I heard a voice sing, "There was a boy, a very strange enchanted boy," and I shut off the TV confused. How the hell did the TV turn on? Having had a few of these unexplained experiences lately, I shook my head in disbelief and looked to the ceiling to say, "What are you trying to tell me now?" When I went to bed, my TV was set to my PC input and I was watching the show in a browser. When I got tired, I shut off the TV, tossed the keyboard, mouse, and my phone off to the right side of my bed. When I woke up, my TV was playing the show on my Chromecast on a separate input from where I watched it last night. I vaguely remember being awake and lying on my stomach just before it happened. I wasn't near my keyboard, mouse, or my charging phone. There were a few ways this could have happened. Possibility 1. The cast command came from my phone. While asleep, perhaps I rolled over and somehow cast the show. There are 5 very specific clicks from opening to casting. And Netflix wasn't even open on my phone when I woke up, so a 6th swipe action to close it. That whole situation seems extremely unlikely. Possibility 2. The Chromecast command came from my PC. So I would have bumped the mouse over to a very small button on the browser screen in Netflix, clicked it, then bumped it again over to click Bedroom TV Chromecast. It's more possible than the phone, but still extremely unlikely. I switched over to my PC input to try to find out what the hell happened. My browser tab with Netflix from last night was still open. The show was still paused where I left it, and the URL bar was all percentage signs for miles, instead of netflix.com/whatever. Aside from that, nothing unusual. If I slept on my keyboard, or bumped it with a blanket or something, there's no percentage key on the keyboard. I'd have had to have slept on Shift F5 without pressing any other keys. The percentage marks are just nonsense and not a command. If you do press enter with those percentage marks in your URL from Netflix, it just does a Google search and returns nothing. There are also no browser or Windows hotkeys to cast directly to that device, I checked. There is a cast shortcut, but you still have to click which device with the mouse. There was just no reasonable explanation. An alarming side thought: if we're saying the human hive mind did this, which is just a collection of humans subconsciously, how the hell does it interact with real objects in the real world, making changes to my Chromecast? No brainwaves have ever amounted to moving things. That makes zero sense. Did it possess some hacker to mess with me? Also ridiculous. If it can just magically screw with my browser to cast to my TV, that blows a massive hole in my theory that it is purely a hive mind made of humans, at least to every understanding of humans I've ever had. We're not X-Men. This would suggest it has some insane power beyond my peanut brain understanding. It doesn't make sense. I dug around and searched for hours to try to find a reasonable explanation for how this happened, and yet again came up with absolutely nothing. The third possibility is I am crazy and I did it myself without remembering. I guess if I'm crazy, I could have hallucinated every event of the whole morning. I double-checked the carbon monoxide detector above my TV. Carbon monoxide can sometimes be responsible for lost memory. Of course, it was fully functional. The fourth possibility from your perspective is that this whole book is a lie. What do I even say to that? I'm left standing here speechless like an idiot. If I were you reading this book, I'd have to assume it's all a lie. It's just too stupid. These strange things have been happening to me since the initial meeting with the hive mind. I know my device is inside and out, and I haven't seen these kinds of malfunctions before in the years I've owned them. For another example, one night I was on the phone with my aunt. I spilled the whole story of the dream with my dead grandfather, and so on. My aunt told me a story about a time my grandfather was mean to her. I lost my temper and said something very bad about him. It was a difficult story to hear, regardless of how I'd forgiven him and knew I should be smoothing things over with the family, not adding extra fuel to the fire. The exact second I hung up that phone, my Mac Mini started blaring the Apple ringtone at full volume and it scared the crap out of me. I yanked the power cord. I was overwhelmed with a nervous adrenalized feeling until I fell asleep that night. It felt like my grandfather was pissed. If it was a message, I guess my grandfather didn't want me stirring up more anger between us. Those feelings just wouldn't be productive for me or for her. For some context, receiving a call on that Mac should have been impossible. I've never received a call from that computer in the 3 years I've owned it. It's not my primary machine. I literally only use it to beta test software on Mac. I also don't have a phone number or Apple email address attached to it, and I've had an Android phone for almost a decade, which can't receive FaceTime calls through any of the Mac apps. I asked all my frequent contacts if they tried to call me at that time, and searched for hours for any explanation, or even a missed call log. Again, I came up with nothing. I work in software development. I'm damn good at solving these problems. There's no better way to mess with me than by putting something unexplainable in my own domain. Anyway, back to the main story about my TV turning on. I gave up on finding out how my TV played me a message, and I opened up the Threads app on my phone. The second post it loaded said, "Artwork made by schizophrenics has a strange focus on eyes." There were two pictures attached. On the left, what looks like some wavy form tan object and many colorful eyes on it. On the right, a cartoonish grayscale spider with 3 eyes on its back. I had a flashback to the eyes I couldn't stop seeing right before I fell asleep. Of course, my first panicked assumption was, well, if I'm seeing eyeballs, and schizophrenics presumably see eyeballs because it's what they draw, I'm definitely turning schizophrenic and fast. This explains so much. But that or any other mental illness I searched for just didn't fit. I know I could be an unreliable narrator, but there's just been too much improvement in my life, and usually people with mental illnesses have the opposite. I've simply never been better. My depression and possible PTSD is cured, I'm happy, I have my friends back, work is going well, my physical pain is mostly healed. If I had to look at how my life is going and say which was responsible, a godlike entity helping me or occasional schizophrenia gave me the kick in the ass I needed to improve my life, I can't help but lean towards the first. I'm also unwilling to accept I'm an unreliable narrator and that these things simply didn't happen, or an alternate personality of mine did all of them. I guess if I was smart, I'd put up security cameras. I decided to consider what these eyeballs are and what they could mean. I got to thinking, if the hive mind is all of us, and some of us are assholes, maybe not all of the brainwaves out there are good brainwaves. Do you remember the cell phone analogy earlier? A good cell phone is bombarded with millions of messages every second, but if it's built properly, it safely ignores those messages. Schizophrenics are mentally ill with minds that don't function properly, that's why they hallucinate. But maybe the voices they're hearing and images they're seeing are intrusive messages from other living or dead beings. Perhaps their minds don't have the defense mechanisms to block out those incoming signals. I think the vast majority of the human hive mind mirrors the morality of humanity. Most of us on this earth are loving and decent, if only imperfect. But if the hive mind contains living and dead humans, and some humans are murderers and rapists, I don't think the entirety of the hive mind could be moral and decent, because not all of humanity is moral and decent. The part of the hive mind I interacted with was all about consent, kindness, love, and free will. Murderers and other terrible people walk among us, and I still know virtually nothing about the dead who don't pass judgment. As a reminder, in my vision, it showed me a version of myself that was not all loving and kind, but it told me I wouldn't be destroyed if I chose to remain that way. The souls that don't pass judgment still exist in the afterlife. Maybe those creepy eyes I saw in my dream last night were the unkind souls of the hive mind. We'll come back to this. Ghosts. As I was staying with my grandma, medical professionals have said she has dementia and implied she's unreasonable and doesn't know what's going on. She has her problems for sure, but they don't care enough to realize her symptoms are very conditional. She was showing severe symptoms of terminal agitation and restlessness. When people are a few days from death, they tend to reach upward and grab and pull things in their sleep. She had a habit of doing this in her sleep with her blanket. Sometimes when she wakes up and she's dehydrated, she starts talking nonsense. They write her off as crazy, but I just sit with her and hold her hand and talk her through it. What's happening is she's repeating what happened in her dreams. If you give her enough time to wake up, she will tell you she was dreaming about something and she thought it was real when she woke up. Have you ever woken up and the chair next to your bed looks like a monster? For us, it takes a few seconds to shake off our dreams. For her, it can take up to 10 minutes.
I pulled this pillow apart to a blanket. How the hell did I do that?
Whenever she's confused, I can just give her sweet tea with lemon juice, a nice mix of sugar and electrolytes, and she snaps awake and comes back to reality. She's just plain not crazy if you take care of her biological needs and treat her like a person. She's in a very old body that is very easily susceptible to fatigue. We would hallucinate too after a few days in the hot desert without food or water or sleep. It just so happens she can get to that point much more easily. When she eats, drinks, and sleeps well, she's always her old self, and might I mention, very sassy.
Did I really say I made this blanket? Oh, Georgie, I'm losing it. Never get old.
About 6 months prior to this, my grandma's dead sister Lisa had started showing up. Actually, her name is not Lisa at all. Mine isn't even George, but we don't need real names. Lisa is always the same when she visits. She sits on the side of my grandma's blind eye, wears a pink gown with gray hair, and has blue-green eyes. She just watches my grandma. She never speaks. She expresses herself through gestures. Lisa had a tough life. My grandma says she had very little love. My dad says my grandma was the only one who really loved her properly. I don't know the polite way to say this, but she had social and intellectual shortcomings that made fitting in hard. My family knows seeing a dead loved one is a very common hallucination you get in old people who are about to die. By the way, Lisa doesn't like me. I don't remember my great-aunt Lisa. I don't know if I even met her. My dad sure did. He loved her and she loved him. Whenever Lisa's ghost is in the room with my dad, my grandma will say something like,
Oh, that's sweet. Lisa is hugging you, Gary.
I also made up the name Gary for my dad. My dad plays along. Lisa is much colder with me. I had started noticing something totally insane, which is when my grandma tells me where Lisa is, if I look in that direction, I feel a slight burning in my chest and on the surface of my head. It feels like there's a heat lamp in that direction. When I turn my head, I can feel the burning roll around from the direction Lisa is in. It's a feeling of dread and anxiety, and it's been consistent for weeks, but I ignore it because I'm alive and Lisa is dead, so she can go kick rocks. I started to consider the possibility that Lisa was real. I already saw my dead grandfather, and God, how could I not entertain the idea? Also, why wouldn't I? I'm stuck in a house 24 hours a day taking care of a 90-year-old woman. At best, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to speak with a real ghost with an interpreter I trust, to be honest. At worst, it's a fun way to pass the time with my grandma when we ran out of things to talk about weeks ago. In retrospect, it wasn't a great idea. Why can't I see them? Ask any end-of-life care nurse. Old folks see their dead relatives sometimes. It is what it is. It's odd that people close to death see spirits, but we don't. Perhaps as we get older, we become so weak and tired, our minds begin to break down. Our minds are losing the natural defenses we need to block out unwanted communication. From an evolutionary perspective, it would be advantageous to live and focus in the physical world where every detail could mean life and death, and to ignore the mostly inconsequential spiritual world. All of your biological needs exist in the physical world, as well as all of your biological threats. Today it's hard to imagine why we would block out the spiritual and focus on the physical. As of the last few hundred years, there aren't a ton of biological threats to us at all. We aren't encountering lions and tigers and bears on our day-to-day. It's just not high on our list of modern concerns. Don't get me wrong, predators still kill people, but it's usually very avoidable. A lot of things have to go wrong to find yourself in that situation. For the most part, we barely even fight with each other anymore. Your life is just not legitimately threatened on most days, so as you sit in your house, there's not much risk to a friendly spirit popping by for a conversation. But let's go back a measly 1,000 years. For all of human history before this point, we were constantly subject to the predator-prey dynamic with deadly stakes. Day to day, our lives are under constant threat from animals, other humans, the elements, and who knows what else. Day to day, the spiritual world offered nothing but a distraction. It would make sense to evolve a vigorous denial, both in perception and belief, of this distracting nonsense spiritual world that offers no benefit to survival or reproduction. As nice as it is to see your dead family members, it would be much more likely to get you killed if it were a regular conscious occurrence. So I draw the parallel between old people with weak dehydrated minds from aging like my grandma seeing Lisa, and schizophrenics or other mentally ill people who hallucinate. Of course we must assume the science is totally correct. Scientists are 100% correct in all their assertions on how to treat these hallucinations. But I'd ask you to consider that maybe the hallucinations a weak mind is experiencing are not random nonsense from within. I'm suggesting that in regards to seeing ghosts, we hallucinate because our mind's protective barriers are weakened, and the things we're seeing are coming from outside the safety of our own minds.
Oh! This jerk is taking his meds again. Let's go mess with Dirty Larry.
Would you talk to a ghost? One afternoon, I was sitting alone with my grandma at the kitchen table, and she mentioned Lisa was sitting across from me. I looked up to the empty seat and got that familiar tingling and burning. Thanks, Lisa. Nice to see you too. I decided to start asking questions. This went extremely poorly. The first question I asked was if she was happy where she was. My grandma relayed the question. For the first time, Lisa responded to her with words. I saw and heard nothing, of course. I just had to trust my grandma would never lie to me, but that was a given. My grandma told me that Lisa said, satisfied to other, but she couldn't quite hear it. My grandma looked and squinted and tilted her head trying to look at Lisa to figure it out. She looked back at me and we concluded that must have meant she was satisfied compared to other options. I guess my grandma's undead hearing isn't perfect, but the shrug and look on Lisa's face was enough for her to figure it out. I thought about the amazing pets I had in my life. We asked if there were animals on the other side. Lisa nodded yes. I cheered and celebrated. My grandma smiled. That's when I noticed the intensity turned up. The burning in my chest and head was almost alarming. My grandma felt nothing, but Lisa was pissed at me. I know ghosts can't hurt you. I remember a conversation with my grandfather when I was a kid. My brother and I were scared. Some lights must have flickered or something after we saw a scary movie. We were nervous and asked about ghosts. He said, all these years, every time someone gets hurt or killed, it's by a man. I've never seen a ghost hurt anyone. You don't worry about ghosts, kid. The scariest thing in the world will be standing right in front of you. I never believed in ghosts, but even now that I was starting to, I still carried his belief. A ghost can't hurt you. With just a hint of hesitation, I moved on to the next question. Lisa had a tendency to come and go. She wasn't always with my grandma. She would blip in and out for minutes or hours, and oddly enough there seemed to be no correlation to my grandma's energy level. My grandma saw a wide range of hallucinations when she was exhausted and blinking in and out of sleep, but Lisa was a pure exception. Lisa could come and go any time, no matter how good my grandma felt. On the days that my grandma felt amazing and lucid, there were no other hallucinations or strangeness, but Lisa would be right there with her. So where was Lisa when my grandma couldn't see her? I asked my grandma to ask if Lisa visited other family members on this earth. My grandma didn't say anything. She looked in Lisa's direction for a moment, then looked back at me and nodded yes. I asked my grandma to ask Lisa if there was reincarnation. My grandma said Lisa wasn't answering. She had stopped playing our game. The burning intensity increased and I got some very slight bursts of panic. I felt like I was being attacked and it actually pissed me off. But one look at my grandma calmed me down, so I recomposed myself to try a softball question. We asked if in death, Lisa visited other countries like a tourist. Also no answer. The dread I was feeling increased another notch. My grandma was just happy, blissfully unaware that her dead sister was trying to burn a hole in me. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get to the good stuff. With one more question, shit went off the rails. With all the recent hype about UFOs, UAPs, aliens, whatever the hell you want to call them, I couldn't think of a bigger question. Do aliens exist? I asked my grandma to ask if aliens exist, and she did. The burning and sense of dread I felt became so intense, I actually hit the point where I wanted to stop asking and get the hell out of the room. I felt intensely sick and nervous and went into a slight panic. I shook it off, but there was genuinely a moment where I wanted to get up without saying a word, leave the house, and never come back. I almost jumped out the damn window. It was a lot of emotions all at once, but it settled on me realizing how ridiculous the situation was. I shook the fear and found myself pissed off and determined to not let a bunch of undead jerks push me around. Then the tone changed. My grandma suddenly looked very nervous, and it was as if Lisa was nervous. My grandma's facial expressions gave it all away. That's when my grandma began acting like someone was speaking through her, like she was lying. I know my grandma, and she began speaking too quickly and in a weird accent. Her loving tone was gone. This was absolutely disturbing to watch. My grandma started frantically saying behind a fake smile that we shouldn't be reaching out to spirits because the Bible says we shouldn't. It was very matter-of-fact and emotionless. She said we didn't even know if we were speaking to Lisa at all. It could have been an evil spirit playing tricks. There was no honesty or warmth in her voice like there always had been for my entire life. I have never seen her speak without warmth. I suppressed it well, but it absolutely struck a nerve in me. It felt like she was being used like a puppet. Something in me changed in that moment. I could almost smile. Up until this moment, I felt pretty out of control of the situation, like I was just being cooked alive. Now Lisa was changing strategies to go full ventriloquist on my grandma. A smug calmness came over me. Why is she changing strategies? Because she hit me with everything she had, and it wasn't enough. I put my hand on my grandma's shoulder, and I told her I loved her, and I smiled to try to get through to her. I chose words that would comfort my grandma and aggravate Lisa at the same time. I said, "Grandma, I think sometimes these spirits speak through you. You and I know damn well you've been seeing Lisa for 6 months, and there's no other spirit. I know you would never believe that, or never say that to me. Are you sure you're the one saying this?" I looked right into her eyes. We held there for an uncomfortably long silence. She smiled nervously at me, but again, it was like I wasn't looking at my grandma. I just held to let her know I wasn't going anywhere and everything was going to be okay. Suddenly, the burning, nervous tingling in my chest released. I sat back, and my grandma was silent for a long moment. I could breathe again. It felt like I had stepped out of a sauna. My grandma told me Lisa had left, and she was her old self speaking normally. We went back to talking about anything else and laughed about how weird that was. My grandma's familiar tone came back. I asked her, "Did you try to tell me Lisa wasn't Lisa, it was a malevolent spirit?" And she said, "No, that was so strange." I told her it was okay. We made eye contact and we were both thinking the same thing. We didn't need to say it. We both experienced something impossible and no one would ever believe us. I shook my head in disbelief at the ridiculousness of the situation. My grandma had been awake for a while at this point, so I put her back to bed, kissed her goodnight as always. She cracked a joke, everything was back to normal. That was the last I ever saw of Lisa. Days passed, and my care schedule overlapped with my aunt from Friday through Sunday. My aunt stayed the weekend, and I got out of the house when she was there for a little relief. On Sunday night, my aunt eventually said to me, "It's so strange, Lisa hasn't been coming around lately. She hasn't been here all weekend." I had to stop myself from laughing, but I let out a smile. She could tell I found her observation amusing and wanted to know why. I told her that Grandma, Lisa, and I had a tense conversation, and I don't think Lisa liked it very much. My aunt laughed and smiled a genuine smile. She must have thought I was joking. She clearly interpreted what I was saying as, my grandma was hallucinating Lisa again, and I played along with her, and my grandma's hallucinations got strange. My aunt and I found a lot of humor in the caretaking situation and had fun together when we could. Turning this into another joke was for the best. I told my aunt that Lisa will be back when I'm gone. Are aliens real? So Lisa was tight-lipped about the alien question, but luckily there is plenty of other evidence for aliens that is slightly more compelling than, I asked a ghost if aliens were real through my grandma with dementia, and it appeared from her body language and the fiery burning in my chest that the question made the ghost uncomfortable, therefore implying I struck a nerve with the ghost, therefore implying that because she didn't answer and went as far as to possess my grandma and attempts to discredit the entire preceding ghost interview, I can conclude that aliens are probably real. Are you glad you've read this book yet? But long before the near-death experience, I always figured aliens have to be real. I found out personally there are levels to life. The lowest we know of being the cell, then moving up to organisms like us, then moving up to a hive mind or a planet. My best guess is the layers of complexity go up and up and up and up infinitely, and why wouldn't they? I had a gut feeling when I was on the other side that life is all and expands to infinity. I don't even know what that means, but I know that I know it. I think Earth is just a drop in the ocean. I can't tell you what's above the hive mind, but I'd imagine it's a hive mind of hive minds, perhaps the mental culmination of many planets. If you want to use very practical scientific terms, we can call it a super mega ultra god. If a super mega ultra god exists, made up of multiple planets, It loves each of its planets like the hive mind loves each of us, like we love each of our cells, like our cells love each of their molecules. If the layers of life go up and up and up, presumably infinitely, you can't hurt anyone on your level without pissing off the level above. That would be like your heart attacking your liver. You wouldn't be okay with it. So if we accept aliens and toss them into the mix, aliens are on roughly the same level as us, but a bit more advanced. If there is a super mega ultra god, we serve the same purpose to it as the aliens do, but maybe aliens are the prestigious heart of super mega ultra god, and we're more of a sphincter. Aliens are undoubtedly not here to hurt us. If they were going to take our resources and enslave us like they do in movies, they could have and would have done it by now. All common sense suggests aliens are here to play nice.
Do you think Super Mega Ultra God exists?
No idea. That's above my pay grade.
Do you trust the experts? I loved the film The Phenomenon. The reason I'm convinced aliens are real is there are just too many hundreds of rational people who swear by their testimony with absolutely nothing to gain. We have tons of high-ranked military guys disputing official reports, despite being pressured and threatened to be quiet. They only stand to lose their careers and credibility, and all the testimony is strikingly similar between witnesses. Senator Chuck Schumer has gone as far as to propose a bill to force the government to declassify what they know. What would a US senator have to have seen to be angry enough to make a stand over such a silly conspiracy theory? I'd say to check out The Phenomenon and go from there. I also liked a few of the episodes of Encounters on Netflix. There are stories about UFOs disarming nuclear weapons. That should tell you everything you need to know they're friendly. As far as expert testimony goes, we're looking at pilots with no history of mental illness seeing big silver ships flying next to them clear as day.
Sir, we have grays at 9 o'clock.
Don't look. Maybe they'll go away.
Pilots are hired for having elite vision and perception. Reliable observation and testimony at high speeds from vast distances is literally their job, and they are the best of the best. Officials claim the pilots were mistaken about seeing UFOs and instead saw heat distortions or coincidental reflections from their cockpits. Ridiculous. These pilots have thousands of hours of flight experience and know every weather phenomenon, every illusion, every type of debris, etc. They hire an individual as a pilot because beyond the composure and steel nerves it takes to perform under that stress, they have elite visual perception and rationality. They're not getting scared and crying wolf over a weather balloon or some shiny glass. They're the most reliable expert witnesses possible for identifying UFOs, and there are hundreds of them. Their expertise, the fact that they have nothing to gain and everything to lose from reporting UFOs, and bits of hard evidence like radar logs and videos, all line up to say we should believe them. I sure do. There have been sightings in dozens of countries around the world, with formal investigations launched by governments of the US, France, Brazil, Russia, the UK, Canada, and more. And those are just the investigations they've disclosed to the public. Believing in aliens is just as absurd as believing in Nessie or Bigfoot, right? Once again, if I'm crazy for writing a few chapters about imaginary aliens, each government spending millions of dollars and decades to investigate them makes them far crazier. Investigating them is the equivalent of the US government sending a search and recon mission for Bigfoot. There have been far too many investigations going on for far too long for all of this to be nonsense. The Ariel School UFO incident happened in 1994 in Zimbabwe. Check Wikipedia. A few kids claim to speak with an alien, and their interviews are great. This incident was thoroughly covered in The Phenomenon and Encounters. For some context, around 62 kids saw a UFO, and a handful saw an actual alien. The next day, they were interviewed by the government. Of the kids that spoke, they all had the same story. The only thing more ridiculous than aliens is that almost 62 kids, under 12 years old, all organized one day to make up the same lie, kept the details consistent, and carried the hoax for 30 years. There were a few kids who denied the story, or didn't see anything, but the majority were on the same page. For the ones who the alien spoke to, the kids described a feeling of dread and fear. They also felt the meaning of the words, but didn't hear words themselves. Well, when I was on the other side, everything was expressed through feelings, not words, in some type of weird universal language. And when my Aunt Lisa was glaring at me, I felt that same dread and fear through that nervous burning. Why is there remarkable consistency in the psychic communication between aliens and humans, and the psychic communication I experienced? Defense mechanisms. When the alien spoke telepathically to the children, the kids felt a sense of dread. But there was nothing dreadful about the messages. These aliens told the kids to avoid nuclear war and deadly technology and to protect the planet. I don't think the aliens were sending a sense of dread intentionally. They were sending messages that were extremely consistent with the hive mind. These were all messages of love, or at worst, common sense. That feeling of dread was a natural defense mechanism built into the children. Maybe that nervous burning is our body's defense against external telepathic thoughts that aren't our own. Maybe that's what I was feeling when squabbling with Lisa. Looking back to my near-death experience, when I received messages from the other side, it was almost invasive. Ideas are a lot more powerful than speech. When someone tells you a story, you can consider the details and decide if you want to believe it or not. When I was in the afterlife, it made me believe certain things with no discussion or convincing necessary. It was as if I just believed them the moment they were sent to me. These beliefs were implanted. I personally believe in the 4 points of the meaning of life with everything I have. I couldn't be expected to have a rational discussion about them at this point. I should make it clear that I very distinctly consented to being changed into the person I am today with these beliefs. It asked if I would like to be changed, I said yes, and it did as we agreed. So in this case, invasive isn't the right word. What I'm getting at is the transformation was frighteningly powerful, to the point where I don't quite recognize myself or my thought patterns anymore. The ideas consensually imposed upon me from my dead grandfather and God are all well and good, and I'm forever grateful to have them. But what if an alien or other human could inject bad beliefs into you? What if another being could make you believe your purpose was to hurt someone or serve them? That's just frightening. Is that what's happening to schizophrenics who hear voices that tell them to hurt people or themselves? I don't know. But I believe we have a natural defense mechanism to feel pain when something imposes thoughts on us. If the defense mechanism exists, there's a reason it exists. Maybe in the past some humans had these abilities, and whether they knew it or not, they were using it to command and manipulate others. Maybe when you have a gut feeling someone is bad news, that's what that is. When I felt that burning in my chest, all I wanted to do was run away. If I could have seen that ghost, I'd have whacked it in the head with a frying pan. From a survival standpoint, sure it sucks that you feel a burning feeling, but if it prompts you to run or fight, that's a much better outcome than sitting there oblivious to being manipulated. It's like the pain of a sunburn. You feel your skin burning, you get out of the sun. The system works. This defense mechanism might not be resisting the psychic influence outright if you can still feel the message, but feeling pain creates a negative association in your mind and lets you know, these aren't my thoughts, something isn't right, I shouldn't listen to this. This is all just my wild guess, of course. There's no way to know where the defense mechanism came from. I guess we'll find out after we die. Intelligence trends towards peace. There are 2 reasons to be peaceful. If you're a moral person, you're peaceful because it benefits yourself and others mutually. But if you're not a moral person and don't care about how it benefits others, being peaceful is still a great way to help yourself. Full-blown sociopaths with no empathy tend to follow laws and cooperate in society peacefully because it's objectively a much easier way to live a better life versus being an outlaw. For the purposes of this chapter, peaceful doesn't have anything to do with morality or love. It just has to do with restraint from violent impulses for cold, calculated mutual gain. Intelligence is a double-edged sword for a community. Intelligence makes us more productive and mostly pushes creatures into communities to combine their intelligence for mutual gain. It also gives us defense against predators and the elements. But it also makes us more capable of violence against each other through technology, weapons, tactics, etc. To live in communities, creatures must evolve to become less violent, or these communities can't function. This is true now more than ever, when we have the technology for any member of the species to decimate dozens in minutes. Overall, the more intelligent a species gets, the more peaceful it must become to avoid destruction by its own means. How many people have you killed in your life? The answer is overwhelmingly going to be 0 for whoever you ask. If we dial back the clock to your direct ancestors, 1,000 years, 10,000, 100,000, a million years ago, etc., with each increment, how many of their own species did they kill? It was probably more and more the farther back you go. If you examine the data in a simple way and just say, how many humans alive today have never killed anyone, you're probably looking at 99.999%. But if you were to do a true average, that number would plummet because you'd have to factor in that there are individual assholes out there that kill tons of people with one bomb. As intelligence trends upward, less people kill overall, but the ones that do kill have the technological means to kill far more. When humans were dumber, violence was simpler and an individual asshole could do less damage. Sure, knives and swords and pokey sticks are really dangerous, and I would not advise you to fight someone who has one, but if your life came down to it, a group of unarmed people could defeat a knife attacker using improvised weapons in cooperation. Especially if the good guys have some combat training, because this kind of fight is still very physical, not so technological. With greater technology like guns, It gives a psychopath the capability to kill far more people on a whim and with far less physical effort than a knife. In terms of survival of bystanders, you can run away from a knife, but it's a lot harder to outrun a bullet. When humanity became intelligent enough to manufacture semi-automatic lethal weapons, it gave any individual the power to kill dozens on a whim. It's so easy to do. We regularly see children killing other people or themselves with guns. This species' self-destruction was just much less achievable with more primitive weapons. What I'm getting at is that if aliens exist and they have technology that can take them to Earth from light years away, the average alien has much deadlier technology than we do. Each alien has the intellectual capacity to do some serious damage to its own species. Whatever we can do with a gun must pale in comparison to what one little gray man can do with a ship, or anything he can build that's more complex than a gun. For them to have made it this far with such violent technological potential, they've probably evolved to become extremely peaceful to compensate. My assumption is that they're all loving and they care about each other, but it doesn't even have to be that. The argument that intelligence trends towards peace would hold up even if they were all sociopaths. They may have simply evolved full logical control over their emotions, or even if they don't love each other, they're logical enough to never escalate to violence because of the incredible mutual assured destruction it would bring. The more intelligent a species becomes, the more peaceful it must become to avoid using the resulting technology for destruction and death. I believe we are going to follow the aliens' evolutionary path. The world is at a turning point where the technology we have can save us or destroy us. The choices we make in regards to energy sources, the climate, weaponry, and AI will determine if we live or die. We can pretty easily infer from the alien ships that they made the right choices in terms of energy. They appear to have zero emissions or environmental impact. If they were smart enough to do that, they must have already overcome the double-edged sword of technology that we're cutting ourselves with right now. We'll either follow in their footsteps and grow to cooperate and be peaceful, or we'll die by our own selfishness and stupidity. We all turn into crabs eventually.
OMG, they totally stole our look.
It looks better on us.
Carcinization is an eye-opening evolutionary process. Go check it out on Wikipedia right now. There are 5 separate groups of animals that are alive today that evolved into crab shapes, despite having no common genetic background amongst each other that was a crab shape. They all just kind of turned into crabs by themselves. The operating theory is that when you're a small creature living at the bottom of the ocean, evolving into the shape of a crab is a really good way to survive, so a lot of organisms do it through accidental evolution. It seems like an impossible coincidence, but it's happened 5 times that we know of, and it's 100% proven with DNA. How does this apply to humans and aliens? Many people are skeptical of aliens and say that it's ridiculous that they would be nearly equivalent to us in shape and size. Many scientists suggest alien life would be completely foreign and weird to us. Maybe they'd be made of goo, or their bodies would be 5,000 degrees, or they'd be the size of Mars.
Hello, Earth. I'm Mr. Toasty, the very warm giant goo alien. I've come to say hello. Would you like a hug?
It would seem astronomically unlikely that aliens on the other side of the universe would evolve to look almost exactly like us. But if we look at crabification, I prefer my term to the stupid scientific one, perhaps evolution across the universe crabifies the most intelligent form of life on any planet into a roughly human-shaped thing. It makes me wonder if when I saw God, it wasn't just a representation of humans, but perhaps all planets dominant intelligent life at the organism scale. Creepy. But if it's true, at least we can make friends.
So, I'm having fun. You don't have, pinchers down there, do you?
If crabification exists for humanoid space travelers like us and the little gray men, my assumption is we're going to evolve almost exactly the same way aliens did. We're going to become less violent and more cooperative, and will evolve telepathic means to communicate just like they have. To evolve separately with potentially billions of years and billions of miles between us, it just seems like too great of a coincidence that we are the same shape and size, and our brain communication is compatible. It just doesn't seem possible from my limited understanding of how evolution works, even with crabification. There are coincidences, and there's 2 meteorites colliding in the same exact spot at the same exact time. I'm dumbfounded. The only possible explanation I can think of is that there's some force in the universe, perhaps super mega ultra god, that is unifying all space-traveling organisms of any given planet into humanoid form, like a bad episode of Star Trek. It just makes more sense than random chance. There's an old saying ringing in my ears. I always thought it was so dumb when I heard, "Man is made in God's image." In context of aliens, fuck, I've got nothing. I think that's the only explanation. Aliens and humans have been placed on the same evolutionary path by something pulling strings. I'm guessing it's less that we're crabifying towards humanoid form by productive random chance, and instead our evolution is being pulled towards a compatible form with the rest of the space travelers in the universe. I see that image of God in my head. By the way, I was definitely taller and more muscular. I wonder if this entire planet is just a seed that Super Mega Ultra God planted. It goes against everything I've ever believed in, but I just can't accept that aliens and us are the same shape and are able to mentally communicate by random chance. How the heck could this happen without shattering evolution? Are you familiar with selective breeding in plants? Look up Brassica oleracea, which is just a nerd name for wild cabbage. The short summary is that cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, and a few more all started as literally the same exact wild cabbage, and humans used the power of picky gardening to make them what they are in just a few thousand years. This is also the story behind apples and every other plant or animal we farm. For simplicity, let's look at apples. Let's say we find a bunch of apples in a range of colors. For whatever reason, we want red apples. With each generation, we eliminate the apples that are farthest from what we like and plant seeds from the ones that are most similar to what we want. Eventually, you get red apples. This works with all attributes of a plant, not just color. Because there are random mutations with each new plant, you can get new attributes that were never once present. So swinging back to the wild cabbage example, some plants would randomly grow larger leaves than its parent cabbage had ever grown by pure luck of mutation in its genetics. The farmers replanted from these specific wild cabbage plants until eventually they were kale, which are essentially really big leaves. In our example of selective breeding, farmers didn't go in and manually edit any DNA, they just influenced which plants reproduced, and eventually the plants evolved in the direction they wanted. What I'm suggesting is if that we and aliens are so unbelievably similar, maybe some super mega ultra god has been using artificial selection on both of us for billions of years to evolve towards humanoid shapes. In conclusion, I think the human race is being cultivated like a plant on multiple levels. 1, I think there's a force far beyond our understanding that's making us humanoid and compatible with the existing humanoid aliens. 2, I think the aliens are doing some direct gardening, and that's why they're zipping around in UFOs and disarming nuclear weapons. Who knows how else they're cleaning up our messes behind the scenes? Wolves to dogs, mankind to blank. I believe wholeheartedly aliens are already here on Earth to help us here and there, but why are they trying to stay mostly hands-off? Aliens can't help us because it would destroy our evolution. Think of the cruelest thing you can do to an animal short of killing it extinct. It's taking away its ability to grow independently. The perfect evolutionary example of this is dogs. Dogs were once mighty wolves, clever, hungry, independent, fierce, and feared. They ruled the forest and needed help from no one. They had true evolutionary potential ahead of them. Humans came in and ruined that. Dogs today are completely dependent on us. Most of them would die if we tossed them out into the wilderness. We bred the ones that were docile, submissive, and lazy and content to have everything provided for them with no independence. That's why aliens can't help us too much. They know it would be cruel to make us dependent on them, however much short-term peace it could bring. For us to evolve as independent moral beings, we need to demonstrate 2 things. 1, we have the intelligence to create, understand, and maintain our own technology. Aliens giving us a spaceship would be about as safe as us giving a dog a semi-truck. 2, with the technology we create, we have the self-discipline and rational reasoning to not use it to kill ourselves. Maybe they're not alien. There's another explanation for aliens that is slightly less crazy, but I promise not to disappoint. In terms of day-to-day conversation, it's still batshit insane and has no hard proof. Another theory is that the aliens in UFOs aren't actually space aliens at all. They're native to Earth and they live deep under the sea. I'm still going to call them aliens. Some people say their crafts dip under the ocean. What concepts might suggest these gray dudes are actually from Earth? In the CIA paper, there's an interesting section we previously looked at that tries to explain how our minds communicate with the universe. The highlight says, consequently, the gateway process is designed to rather rapidly induce a state of profound calm within the nervous system and to significantly lower blood pressure to cause the circulatory system, skeleton, and all other physical organ systems to begin vibrating coherently at approximately 7 to 7.5 cycles per second. The resulting resonance sets up a regular repetitive sound wave which propagates in consonance with the electrostatic field of Earth. It says that our brains and bodies resonate around 7 Hz and the Earth's ionosphere resonates around 7 Hz. The Earth was here before humans were, and it has always resonated around that frequency. This means in order for us to resonate with it, we had to evolve to match it, not the other way around. We evolved to adapt to whatever our environment is, the same way fish evolved to live in salt water and plants evolved to take energy from the sun. If aliens are from this planet, perhaps they've also evolved to resonate with the Earth like we have, benefiting both of us by enabling long-range subconscious communication. And because both of us resonate at the same frequency within the same system, our brains have been involuntarily interacting for millions of years. If aliens were also from Earth, it would conveniently explain a lot of other similarities and compatibilities too. We are roughly the same size because we share a planet with the same gravity. It would help explain why there's never once been a mention of bacteria or viruses being problematic between humans and aliens in all of our encounters. We're already both exposed to and somewhat immune to the same pathogen types. And maybe we both came out to be the same shape and share a ton of other characteristics because our evolution somehow became entangled through that constant involuntary subconscious telepathic connection. Maybe simply seeing each other's forms in our dreams influenced what we considered normal, influencing both of us to choose mates that looked more similar to each other. Aliens living underground makes even more sense because it would easily explain why they don't want us to nuke the planet. They live on the planet. It would explain why they study us. It would be less because they're curious, and more because they need to know what they're dealing with. It would explain why they're so secretive and don't want us to know they exist, because they understand and fear our violent nature. If humans had confirmation a super advanced species lived under the Earth's core, every government in the world, especially America's, would be frantically developing subterranean drill nukes to take them out.
Come on now! We need to take those slimy red, green communists out!
We are just that fucking awful. The second we knew, we'd be developing plans to dig in, conquer and kill them, and take their technology. The average person would be against preemptive violence, but every government leader would blast us with propaganda until we agreed. The government would spin the same tired narrative they do with every war that we have to kill them before they kill us. They'd carry out false flag events, and it would be even easier to dehumanize an enemy that's not human. If I could defect against humanity and go join the peaceful, weird-looking ground aliens, I'd do it in a heartbeat. If aliens live here on Earth, that does create a hell of a problem for us. It means we pose a threat to them with our reckless and destructive ways, mostly in terms of how we're damaging and poisoning the environment through industry and war, never mind whatever unpredictable, unhinged shit we'd do if we learned they were here. It would give them valid reasons and rights to defend themselves from our actions. All I can say is I hope they're from outer space, because if they're from here, our continued exploration of the planet makes confrontation inevitable. They can't let themselves go extinct because we have no control over our violent and reckless impulses. I still believe they must be kind, loving, and peaceful, and I hope if they confront us, they would take the diplomatic approach. I'd imagine one conversation would clear things up and get us to radically change our destructive ways. Let's hope they're from outer space, and let's hope it never comes down to a conflict between us and them. If they decide against diplomacy, we'll most certainly lose. Is the Earth flat? No, but I wanted to give Javadoodles an excuse to draw another funny picture. The importance of honesty. Coming back from outer space and the deep ocean, you might feel slightly insignificant. But every creature on every scale of life is just as important as the next, and there's always something greater. From where you stand as a human, what can you do to help the most right now? In my near-death experience, it felt there was a unique emphasis around Rule 4, be honest. Dishonesty is destroying the world right now. We are conditioned to trust no one because of the media, the government, advertisements, terms and conditions, fine print, the way we do business, the way we date, and all of our interactions with everyone everywhere. The way we behave today would have been culturally condemned many years ago. There's no trust or honor among humanity. If you are lucky, you trust your partner, a few family members, and a few friends. You can't do business on a handshake because dishonesty is gamified in our culture. A great amount of our time and money is expended enforcing contracts in business or bypassing contracts legally through loopholes. There is no trust by design. It's simply understood in America that it is good practice to squeeze everyone for as much as legally possible. And it's ethically okay because everyone is doing it. Our culture of gamified dishonesty is preventing true human cooperation and mutual interests. My favorite example of dishonesty you might not think about is self-delusion. People destroy themselves when they believe their own lies. Dishonesty justifies bad behavior.
Well, I'm just better than everyone else.
I wasn't wrong. They were out to get me.
Well, they did something even worse, so it's fine.
At the time of my judgment, I was made to be 100% honest with myself, and I was able to improve myself in many ways. It helped me release unhealthy parts of my ego. Sometimes we can't be everything we want to be in life, and that's okay. I won't continue to lecture, but you need to make an effort to be 100% honest with yourself, and at least try to be more honest with others in all reasonable ways you can. There's a great quote by Fyodor Dostoevsky that I ran into by chance just before publishing this book. I owe him the respect of dropping his quote here. Above all, do not lie to yourself. A man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to a point where he does not discern any truth either in himself or anywhere around him, and thus falls into disrespect towards himself and others. Not respecting anyone, he ceases to love, and having no love, he gives himself up to passions and coarse pleasures in order to occupy and amuse himself, and in his vices reaches complete bestiality, and it all comes from lying continually to others and himself. A man who lies to himself is often the first to take offense. It sometimes feels very good to take offense, doesn't it? And surely he knows that no one has offended him, and that he himself has invented the offense and told lies just for the beauty of it, that he has exaggerated for the sake of effect, that he has picked up on a word and made a mountain of a pea. He knows all of that, and still he is the first to take offense. He likes feeling offended, it gives him great pleasure, and thus he reaches the point of real hostility. I could have saved myself a lot of trouble if I ever read a book in my life, huh?
You got here. That's what matters.
The game of truth. I have some friends and family that have known me for years, and they know I do not lie to them. I am truthful and always act in their best interests. I mean, maybe I lied about having the flu when really I was embarrassed about being hungover, but I don't lie to them about anything serious, and I don't hurt them with lies. I am still guilty of lying in weakness and embarrassment, but overall my honesty track record where it mattered is up there with the best of them. I'm so sorry guys, I must have the flu, I can't make it in today. Years of disciplined honesty have had an amazing reward. I've told people my crazy story about the hive mind, and a good amount of them have believed every word and felt closer to me after our conversation. I never would have expected it. I could cry thinking about each phone call where I called someone who really mattered to me, and I expected the worst response. I was so shocked and grateful when they actually believed me. It hurt to have these experiences and just have to bury them. I felt unbelievably lucky there were people I could talk to. This book is absolutely crazy, but I spent my whole life gaining the trust of certain people, and the payoff was that when in that one moment I needed them to listen and trust me in defiance of all logic, they actually did. I've also made the mistake of telling people I don't know well about this, and they predictably all think I need to be committed to a mental institution. I just found it funny that I told the same story with the same details to two groups of people, and there was such a bias in how someone trusted me or not, it completely changed their impression of the same story. When someone trusts you, they experience your experience through you as if it happened to them. The hive mind has created a game of truth. To recap, I've had a dozen interactions with the hive mind since my near-death experience. It proved itself to me clear as day, but it didn't give me any proof I could take back to you. From all I've gathered, it has created a game for us to play, and the rules are as follows. We can only properly interpret the hive mind signals if we are being completely honest with ourselves about what we are seeing and experiencing. The hive mind will prove itself to some of us, but won't give us any tangible evidence we can bring to others. We are imperfect, so each of us can only understand small pieces of the puzzle. We need everyone with all types of experience to understand all of what it has to tell us. The only way to corroborate stories about the hive mind is to compare each other's individual experiences. The only way we can compare reliably is if all of our stories about it are 100% honest. One lie from a person we trust can make the puzzle unsolvable, and we have to start from scratch. When we have achieved a universal level of honesty and trust with each other, the reward will be the reveal of the hive mind. I've seen it myself.
I can't get my pieces to fit.
We don't have enough information, or someone is lying.
Don't blame us. Our pieces fit perfectly.
Don't listen to that science devil worship. I spoke to God. You can go to heaven. Just give me a little more money.
My family was never religious. We grew up thoroughly rejecting the hate we saw in churches. My parents both had some belief in God, but my siblings and I were clear atheists. I had some very strange conversations with my family the last time I came home. We each had stories that were all just a little too crazy about supernatural things that happened to us, but we were each far too afraid to tell each other for fear of looking stupid. We each swallowed our pride and put our cards on the table and learned a lot. My mom also had stories where the TV turned on completely at random, giving strange messages. One time, when she was home in the living room, the TV turned itself on to a broadcast about how to talk to your kids about a pet dying. Later that night, our dog died. She never told me this story because she knew I'd reject it. Even as a young kid, I was all about science, facts, and hard evidence. She said that whole day had a few exceptionally strange things happen that couldn't be coincidence, but I was so hard on her when she brought up the supernatural, she didn't bother telling me much about it. Sorry, Mom. So the last time I was home, we all sat down and just laid out the craziest shit that's happened to us over our lives and found remarkable similarities. When my dad and I were taking shifts watching my grandma, we overlapped a few nights. It was good because I usually go to bed late and he wakes up early. We both noticed something very strange. When my grandma was inches from death, she'd be laying in her bed with her arms outstretched in terminal restlessness. She'd have loud conversations with her sister Lisa. She'd often have the same conversation, and it was just so beautiful. She'd say, "Lisa, what are you upset about? We're going to heaven. We're going to be with God. You and I will be together forever. Everything is going to be wonderful and happy all the time. There will be no pain and no jerks. Come on." My dad and I had the same thought. Every time she started saying this, we tried like hell to record a video of it on our phones. It wasn't to prove anything about God, because it wouldn't. My grandma just seemed so happy and at peace with her death, we wanted to record it because it was a beautiful moment and I wanted to share it with my brothers so they could have a little peace with my grandma's death too. There were no less than a dozen times where my grandma would start on this conversation, and my dad or I would peek extremely quietly around the door from 10 feet away and pull the phone from our pockets. The second the phone came out and started recording, she'd go silent. We would both sit there recording, 5, sometimes 10 minutes, nothing. Then the moment we stopped and put the phone back in our pockets, she would continue again at full volume. 2 or 3 times is a coincidence. My dad and I experienced this independently too many times to count, and 2 or 3 times when we were together. My grandma's eyes were closed, we were 90 degrees off to the side. There's no way she could see us or hear us. The timing of my grandma avoiding the recordings was so specific, it humbled both of us. It felt like something was watching us and wanted to let us know we were not allowed to record that, no matter how sneaky we tried to be. It felt like we were being toyed with. We looked at each other and tried to decide if we should be inspired or terrified. Nothing makes you feel small and insignificant quite like acknowledging the impossible. It felt like we were being outsmarted, and it felt like it was sending a message to us to step back. We could listen in, but those conversations were not to be shared with the world. Like I did with my mom, my dad and I put our cards on the table. We told every damn hive mind, God, supernatural, whatever story. He had some better stories than mine, but even if this book is anonymous, his stories aren't mine to tell here. It was funny because one day my aunt told us that she was frustrated because she was trying to record my grandma speaking to Lisa. It was the same heartfelt conversation about heaven, and it was just so beautiful she wanted to have it forever to remember her mom. My aunt was laughing when she told us her story. She said she felt like a dope because every time she tried to record it, she mistimed it. She said she tried so many times on multiple days and failed every single time. I probably should have put all my cards on the table for her, but again, it's a lot to get into. My dad and I both said we had the same exact experience when trying to film my grandma. He laughed and said, "Well, I suppose it's just the spirits playing tricks on us." And of course my aunt laughed because that's a funny joke, and I had to suppress my laugh because I knew he was serious but having fun with her. My parents and I may casually disagree on certain specifics of our theories, but those hardly matter. We're done hiding anything from each other. I'm glad they both shared their stories with me. Without those stories, I couldn't have written this book. So again, I think the hive mind has created a game for us, and my family is winning, or at least making progress with our honesty. You should start playing with the people you trust too.
Oh, hi, kids. Look, Georgie, it's your parents.
I die and they all lose it.
You'll be staying here now.
I feel like this is my fault. Contact the hive mind. Like I said, I'm not special. You want to contact the hive mind? You can too. I can't promise it'll answer back, but I can help you improve your odds. The first thing is to tell it you're committed to its mission and to mean it and act on it every day. Again, tell it you are committing to being good to yourself and to others, to helping the growth and survival of humanity in the earth, and to being honest. Say it out loud to an empty room. I get the distinct feeling it doesn't want to overstep its bounds, so be clear about what you want it to do and not do. Don't be shy to be selfish about what you want. Growth is part of the plan, and pursuing good things for yourself is good for humanity, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. If you died, wouldn't you want the person you are following to achieve their dreams? Whoever or whatever is following you is doing so to make you happy. Finally, if your case is anything like mine, expect less help when things are going well. It behaves like a cat in the sense that it comes around on its terms, not yours. Should you believe me? Hell no. Oh my god, no. That is just the worst idea ever. Have you learned anything at all about anything? The worst thing I could do is pressure you to believe me when I have literally zero evidence and I haven't done anything to deserve that kind of influence over you. I haven't saved any lives, had any major life accomplishments, I haven't had any real struggles. I've had a good, slow, and steady track record of being kind to people, but that's not exactly uncommon. I'm a completely normal, average guy at best. This is my experience, and you should take it skeptically. I hope the book entertained you, and I hope at a minimum you agree the values projected in it are ethical by any atheist standards. But to believe me outright would not be safe. My childhood best friend, 39, doesn't believe me, but I'm honored by the fact that we're still best friends and nothing has changed. I'll never try to force him to believe any of it. He's always lived a life according to the meaning of life bit, which is the only part that matters, so we'll be best friends until we die. Little does he know we'll be best friends after we die too. If you don't believe me, I would just say I hope you can still say you agree with the message and morals of the book. You disagree with my experience and believe it was simply a fantastic mental breakdown. The two ways you can find the truth are by being honest to yourself about everything you see and experience in your own life, and then by forming deep, meaningful, honest relationships with other people. Only after you've vetted someone for a very long time should you trust them with something they're unable to prove. I'm not suggesting I'm one of those people to you. Anyone who would is a manipulative asshole. A big part of me felt gross writing this book because I was so afraid to become everything I've always hated in organized religion. There are so many pricks out there who will tell you anything they can to make money and get what they want at anyone's expense, and condemn and gaslight you for asking questions. You should look at me with skepticism based on my motives. Maybe this guy is telling the truth, but I will be extremely aware of everything he can gain from this. Is he making money off of this? Is he hurting or taking advantage of anyone? What might I not see here? Also, I'm not even that confident in everything I wrote here from a scientific perspective. My knowledge of psychology, evolution, science is all just from casual reading. We need actual scientists with expertise in their fields to assess the plausibility of any of this. I'm an expert in imaging and software development, that's it. Beyond that, I'm connecting dots in the dark. The only thing I have absolute confidence in is that there's an afterlife and a thing that mostly resembles God that told me it's made up of all of us. I'm 100% confident it wants us to be happy, loving, helpful, and honest. It does not want us to fear it. It's not even above us in a manner of thinking because it is us. I'm 100% confident there's a self-judgment when you die, but it's really easy to pass because it doesn't expect perfection. I know it can heal us and help us based on what it did with me, and I know the meaning of life. I'd bet my life on all of those things being true. Everything else in this book is guesswork and funny pictures. I'd like to thank my editor. The strangest thing has been happening when I write this book. I asked it to help me write, and bluntly, I asked it to save the damn world and help me do my small part in that. I asked it to help me write a book that would successfully change people's minds and get them to think more cooperatively. I wanted to help spark a revolution in thinking. I agreed that if it would help me write, I'd release the book online for free. More than once, I've sat in an empty room and just asked, what the hell do you want me to write here? I don't understand. Is this correct? Can you just tell me outright? Your signals are too vague. Can we schedule a conference call in my dreams tonight? Why does it always have to be a game? I found most of the time when I write, I'll be plugging away at a paragraph and get this weird stabbing pain in my chest. I take that as a signal something I wrote wasn't correct or wasn't worded how it wanted it to be. When that happens, I Google about the subject and look for inspiration. Sometimes I'll just delete and rewrite with another idea, and I won't stop until that stabbing pain goes away. I remember one time I was writing that I thought it consisted of all the energy in the universe but not the physical matter. I got such a sharp stabbing pain that I really remembered how much that sucked. I deleted what I wrote and wrote something else. Nothing made the pain go away, so I deleted the whole paragraph and moved on. Only then did that familiar stabbing pain pass. Months later, I found myself reading that CIA paper. It explains that the entire universe is truly just one giant interaction of energy, with no true separation between any of the energy or matter. Mind you, this concept isn't unique to the CIA paper. This is stuff Einstein would have agreed with that happens to be in the CIA paper. Physical matter isn't exactly solid in the way a layman, me, thinks about it, because atoms consist of positive and negative charge. Atoms are literally a form of energy and a manner of thinking. Matter and energy can be converted back and forth into each other. They're not distinctly different. I had forgotten about that. The highlight reads, science now knows that both the electron which spins in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. It turns out when I was getting those stabbing pains, I was writing some very wrong information about basic physics a 5th grader would know. I'm glad I got those pokes throughout the writing process. When writing, I also notice that sometimes I get weird, but pleasant, tingles in my body when I think I'm writing things it likes. There are other times when my mind is completely blank and my fingers are just hammering away at the keyboard. You know that feeling when you're in a meeting or in class and you're just not paying attention and daydreaming? Or when you're reading a book and your eyes are just drifting over the words but not taking them in? I get that exact feeling where I'm not paying attention to what's in front of me, but my fingers are writing about the most complex concepts I know nothing about. I also noticed I've been using big words I don't know and have to look up the meaning in the dictionary after I do to find out why the fuck I felt compelled to put that word in there. There's a long paragraph, "Your consciousness belongs to the hive mind only," early in the book, and that was the most I had help from my ghostwriter. So much pun intended it hurts. That section felt like it mostly wrote itself. I looked back on it after I wrote it like I was reading it for the first time. I draw a parallel to when my grandma was getting puppeted by Lisa. Maybe when I was writing, some dead physicist took the wheel. I guess I could have also developed a split personality, but I prefer the ghostly explanation. I can't tell you why I was so motivated and compelled to write this book like a madman. For most of my life, I do the bare minimum. I am so lazy. I do what it takes to pay the rent and just get by. It takes me months to get to any important thing on my to-do list. For this book, it hasn't been uncommon for me to write and draw 10 hours a day. It's like a voice telling me if I can just get this done, everything is going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. This is all I need to do. I just need to get it done, and everything is going to be okay. I'm so sick of love. In my story, where the TV turned itself on to play part of a song, I shut off the TV immediately. But later that night, I finished the episode. At the end of the episode, the song came up again. Okay, dude, you woke me up at 6:30 a.m. with this song. There had better be something good to it. As a character was singing, I remember leaning into my TV in extreme suspense, wondering if there was some special message coming I should be aware of. The song went on and on and on until finally the woman on screen sang, "The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return." I smiled and rolled my eyes like it just nailed me with a good prank. It felt like a genuine message, but also felt like it was teasing me. I've never been so good at the romantic love thing. I've tried plenty of times, but it never worked out. I've been avoiding getting sentimental in this book because it's just not my personality. But to be clear and fair to the hive mind, every single interaction I've had with it from the first time has screamed, "The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return." If I was being a little bit less stubborn and more honest with the messages I was receiving from the hive mind all along, each page would be dripping with hearts and roses. I remember a conversation with my grandma. I can't remember if it was before or after the whole ghost incident, but she was talking about sins. Her voice changed again, and it wasn't her speaking. It decided to play therapist. It was clear this message wasn't a broad statement about humanity, it was laser pointed at me. She told me that I have to be careful of pride. Pride in the delusional stubborn sense, by the way, not the just being proud of yourself sense. This kind of pride causes a lot of problems in our lives. Every night when I lie awake, I think about certain friends, former romantic interests, and other people I was once close to. I told you the truth when I said that I made up with some core friends and family immediately following the first meeting with the hive mind. It was easy to repair the relationships where we had known each other for a very long time, and it was easy to smooth over family relationships because my dead grandpa all but commanded it. But there are other friendships I've lost that have been my fault that I never reached back out to. My grandma told me in not so many words that pride was standing in the way of my happiness, and again, it felt like the message wasn't from her. By the way, my grandma doesn't know I'm a stubborn prick with a hot temper. I always bring my best face to her. She's always thought I was perfect in every way because that's always what I've wanted her to see. She has no reason to lecture me about pride problems she didn't know I had. On late nights like tonight, I think about lost friends, lost from my own pride. I think, I can fix this friendship and I'd love to have them in my life again. All I have to do is send one text. But then the morning comes and it seems unreasonable and I don't want to do it. I'll look stupid like I'm crawling back to them. What if they're bitter I've let all these years pass? What if they've completely moved on and I mean nothing to them? I fully believe it is telling me exactly what I have to do, and yet I can't bring myself to do it. To those of you I've lost, if you're out there reading this, just know that I miss you and I'm sorry. A moment of hope. On April 8th, 2024, there was a solar eclipse over North America. A half hour before peak eclipse, I left my apartment to walk to the park. As I entered the park, I saw hundreds of people sprawled out in the perfect weather. I walk through this park usually once, sometimes twice a day, and have for a decade. But this time was different than it's ever been. Everyone was so happy. I don't even remember seeing faces or making eye contact with anyone, but I could just feel it. As I walked deeper into the park towards the main field, it was like I was walking on air. I didn't have a care in the world. My guard was down, everyone was my friend, everything was just perfect. I recognized the feeling and was completely stunned. It was the same exact feeling I had on the other side. Maybe the feeling wasn't of quite the same magnitude, but there was no mistaking it for what it was. It was so surreal to be there and feel that again. I kept walking down the hill to the center of the field and found a spot. I laid down on my back to stare up at the sun. 2 people came over and sat next to me, much closer than would be comfortable or socially acceptable on a normal day, but today we were friends. We nodded and said hi. Kids were playing soccer on the field. For once, no one cared or made a fuss when a ball got kicked onto their blankets. They just smiled and tossed the ball back like decent human beings. Everyone was talking to everyone. There were no strangers. Suddenly, it was time, and everyone went silent. As the moon crossed in front of the sun, everything dimmed and the clouds turned silver. I could only think one thing. This is fucking amazing. I just sat there staring at it through my burner phone, as to not burn my eyes out, occasionally looking around to take in the scenery and the other people. I hate people watching. I've always preferred to be alone in the middle of nowhere. I usually think anyone who says they like people watching must be a complete psychopath. But in this moment, I was genuinely fascinated by the joy I saw. I was so hopeful for once, seeing everyone living life exactly as they should. I think that moment was the most at peace I've ever been in context of a community. If I had to list the best moments of my life, there are better ones with specific individuals, but this was still of honorable mention. It was the first and only time I saw a massive group of people acting as one, without a hint of aggression, ego, selfishness, or anything even slightly negative. We all came together for collective joy. It reminds me of the eclipse of Talis. Long story short, a bunch of dudes in 585 BC were stabbing each other on a battlefield, probably for a dumb, unjustified reason. Then an eclipse happened. They paused as darkness fell, and took it as a sign from the gods to stop fighting. There came an immediate peace. I can't help but feel a subtle parallel between this moment and my eclipse. I guess stopping a cascade of literal murders is more impressive than New Yorkers being genuinely kind to each other for an hour, but not even by that much if you understand New York. I think as far as being a hive mind goes, I think we actually can feel the emotions of people around us. I slightly suspect if I had been dragged blindfolded through the park that day, not knowing about the eclipse, I would still feel that heaven sensation because every person around me was simultaneously calm, cooperative, and full of joy. There's no reason we can't have that feeling all the time. Some have joked that the eclipse is an art piece created by higher powers. The fact that the sun is 4,000 times larger than the moon, and the moon is 4,000 times closer to us, makes a huge coincidence that they appear to be the same size in the sky. It's also a pretty wild coincidence that the moon orbits the Earth in such a way that solar eclipses happen commonly, but not too commonly. Did the gods create the eclipse system very specifically for artistic beauty? Did they create it to stir up love and harmony when they occur, reminding us we all have something in common and are essentially one big family? Probably not. I think every planet is bound to have 1 or 2 epic beautiful coincidences. We get sunsets, tides and waves, and warm breezes every day, and we don't even give a shit about those anymore. Anyway, this was a moment of collective joy for the sake of joy, and it was one of the only times I've experienced it. I don't understand how American culture got this way. We don't even try to have joy. Joy is not taught or talked about. We are here to make money, and very little else matters. How the hell do I take what I felt from that eclipse and tell others that's what life can and should be like every day? I don't think they even know they'd want it. They really just want money. Either way, I'm still very grateful for that moment. It was the first time I considered that maybe humanity could feel unified all the time. That moment showed me a side of humanity I had never seen and gave me a certain hope I had never known before. I know exactly what I want for humanity now. I want every day to feel like an eclipse day. I just don't know how to get us there. I suppose from everything I've learned these last 4 months, it's not so much about me. The way is for all of us to agree we want that, then it'll work itself out from there. But what about Grandma? Today is April 26th, 2024. My story was really my grandma's too. When I went to stay with her a few months ago, my grandma was experiencing all the textbook signs of a person dying of old age. She had terminal restlessness, lost a ton of weight, and was sleeping 20 hours a day. At some point in there, she also had a bout of terminal lucidity. I sent this text to my brother. Look up terminal lucidity. She had it last night. It was hilarious. She woke up at 2 a.m. and raided the fridge. We found her completely dominating my meatball sub on the couch. She forgot her walker because she forgot she couldn't walk without it. Then she acted like she was on cocaine and meth for the next 2 hours. She's never been so happy or laughed so hard. It was actually pretty great. He replies, OMG, ha, Amazing. Shortly after that, visiting doctors gave her 2 weeks to live because she had no appetite, bed sores, and her skin was turning purple over her temples. She only weighed 85 pounds. It was tense for about 2 months, but she didn't die. I can't tell you how many times I found her to be suspiciously quiet and still. I'd tiptoe up to her bedroom door and just watch her lay there motionless with her mouth open. I told myself I wouldn't be sad when she died. I knew what awaited her was better. But for some reason, whenever I was staring it in the face, I just wanted her to be alive. Not now. I'd just sit there for what felt like forever, waiting for her to move or make a sound. Then she'd take a loud, jerky, gasping breath, I'd sigh with relief, and go back to what I was doing. Then somehow, she just kinda got better. I didn't want to put this in the book, but my dad suggested if I'm telling this story, I should be more fair to my Aunt Lisa, to which point I agree. I went fishing with my dad today after seeing my grandma for lunch. I was nervous about it, but I told him about the burning fiery dread I felt from Lisa, and basically gave him the whole rundown from the ghost attack in the dining room. We had some awkward conversations about the book, and I figured if it's going to release, I have no way to prevent him from reading it anyway, so I might as well soften the blow, telling it piece by piece in advance. He told me a few things he believed. He said my grandma had told him multiple times over the previous few months that she wasn't sure Lisa was really Lisa. She said something about her just didn't feel right. I didn't know this before today, and of course before writing anything in the book you've just read on Lisa. He said in not so many words that regardless of what happened, fact or fiction, hallucination or real ghost, I should be fair to who Lisa was as a person. Lisa loved everyone. He never saw her express a bad thought towards anyone. She was timid, and you couldn't even get her to badmouth a person. She had no anger, and he said, all I'm saying is if there was a ghost, and it hurt you in any way, there's no way it would have been your great Aunt Lisa. He said it was pointless to speculate, but he said he loved his Aunt Lisa so much, and she would have loved me, so that if I was feeling dread and burning in the kitchen, he was far more likely to believe my grandma's assumption that it was literally some random evil spirit pretending to be Lisa, and not actually her. I think that crossed the threshold where the conversation and guesswork was too crazy even for me. I'm not saying that's not the case, I'm just saying at this point it's pointless to speculate. Evil impersonator ghosts are not why I started writing this book or what this book is about. We talked about how we never expected my grandma to get better, but she did. He said that my grandma had told Lisa that she wanted to live and told her firmly to go away. He said around the same time Lisa left, my grandma's health turned around. And no, I'm not implying a ghost can keep a person sick, but all these details are part of the story, so here it is in the book. Earlier today, before this conversation with my dad, I had asked my grandma why she asked Lisa to leave. She said it's because Lisa was there for herself, because she was lonely, and not for my grandmother's benefit. My grandma wanted to live, and that was that. I had asked my grandma to draw a picture of Lisa for the book, and she seemed uncomfortable and changed the subject. It was clear she wasn't fond of Lisa the same way she was the last time I saw her. I'm not about to try to become a damn ghost detective. All I can say is I certainly got bad vibes from Lisa. I didn't want to admit it, but I came to despise that presence and felt extremely territorial over my grandma when Lisa was around, and I didn't know why. The thought that it wasn't actually my aunt is exceptionally disturbing in some ways. I don't like the idea of an evil impersonator spirit trying to murder my grandma, but it would be slightly comforting in the way that my gut assumption was right, and I was justified to tell whatever spirit was causing that burning in my chest to fuck off. I've gone too far down the rabbit hole of nonsense and need to pull myself out. I don't feel proud writing this specific section of the book, but my honesty policy has got me by the balls. This is the whole story. I'm aware this tilts me over from the fun side of crazy to the paranoid side of crazy, and I don't like that one bit. I have nothing more to say on the subject of evil grandma killing spirits. Do with it what you will. A few weeks ago, after she started to get better, we moved my grandma into assisted living, where she has her own little apartment with a wonderful staff. It's not a hospice facility, it's a step before that. They play games, watch movies, and have fun all day. The color returned to her face, and while she's still using a walker and a wheelchair for safety, she walked arm in arm with me all the way from the dining hall to her room so she could prove to me how strong she was. She's made friends. It felt like move-in day at a college dorm, except the dorm is really old and decrepit with maybe one full set of teeth among all of them. She's as happy as I've ever seen her, surrounded by new friends, and I hope she has plenty of good years ahead of her. I didn't expect her to live long enough to read the book. Maybe now she will. Although, I'll definitely make a copy for her with the Lisa chapters cut out. Today I showed her illustrations of us in the book, and she loved them. My dad took this picture. The framing is terrible, but good enough. I started to unravel the book to my mom too. She was surprisingly cool with it. The whole damn experience felt a lot like what I imagined it would be to come out of the closet. But instead of a gay closet, it's a kind of spooky, weird, mentally unhinged ghost closet. Again, in an effort to tell the whole story, there's one last piece. I was in a bad place and very angry the last time I saw my mom around Christmas. This was just before the first meeting with the hive mind. It was mostly because I was in intolerable pain. I never said it, but it was pretty clear to her I didn't want to be here anymore. I had too many friends and family take opioids and die from them over my life. One of my best friends in college had spine surgery and was prescribed OxyContin. One thing led to another, he got addicted to opioids, he overdosed and died. The injury I had was excruciating, but I told myself I'd rather die than take that shit, both because it could get me addicted and kill me, and because I'd rather die than pay a single penny to the scumbags responsible for the opioid crisis. But the pain I was in was hardly survivable. She told me she prayed to God, her parents, my grandfather on my dad's side, and her brother to help me. She said she called the cavalry of every dead soul she knew because she didn't know what else to do. Apparently my grandfather on my dad's side stood at the ready. Thanks, Mom. Anyway, all good things must come to an end, except my grandma who will outlive us all. Let's wrap this up. Where am I going now? I'm satisfied with what I know about the other side. It's time to go back to my life and stop chasing ghosts. I saw a great film the other day called Spaceman. Because I used a shot from this film as inspiration for the cover, I decided to pay respect to it here. In Spaceman, Adam Sandler, my favorite actor growing up, goes to discover great scientific mysteries at the expense of his personal life. He leaves his wife and unborn child behind. He ends up meeting the universe. Funny enough, in this shot, the universe looks almost identical in the movie to what I saw as the universe/God/it in my near-death experience, and they both function exactly the same. When I saw this shot, my jaw hit the floor and I sent a picture to Javadoodles. This one shot feels more like the it I saw than I was able to draw myself. In my experience, it didn't have color like the purple you see in the film, but their art team somehow captured the shape and volume and essence of it much better than I did. So I've adopted that pink and purple. Adam Sandler, our metaphor for humanity, learns at the end of his journey that he made the wrong move. He pursued science and greatness when the main thing that matters in life is family and love. There are a lot of parallels to this book. It's nice that I know what I know now after a few months of reading and writing, but ultimately the knowledge beyond is not my problem. I have no more serious questions, just a little fun curiosity I can take casually. I enjoyed meeting it and would love to again, but if it just wanted to brush the dirt off of me and send me back on my path, I'm good with that. There's nothing for me on the other side. I see no need to try to learn more. I'm pulling my head out of my ass. My job now is to live my life as a human well, and help the world however I can. My job can't be summarized as serving God, though. That goal is often misinterpreted and can lead to things like the Crusades. From the beginning, I was told it is a combination of all of us. That was the first belief it implanted in me. My job is to use my best judgment to serve the best interests of all of humanity, which is the same thing as serving God, but with no risk of misinterpreting messages. Serving humanity is the perfect focus point because it allows people of all religions and atheists to find easily agreeable goals. If you want to know what it would say to you or think of you, it's pretty easy to infer. I go back to the example in the first chapter with the white blood cell. In this scene, our little white blood cell is having a rough day. Think about it. You are a god to that white blood cell. It's a little valiant fighter that you love who would fight and die for you. But if it had questions for you, how could you answer them in a way it could understand? You couldn't. It can't truly know its place in the body, or what the body is, or what it is you do, or why, even if you made a sincere effort to explain. In a way, it's unfair. You are much greater than the white blood cell, but only in terms of intelligence, not in terms of importance. Without you keeping your body alive, the white blood cell and every other cell in your body would die. But without the white blood cell and its merry band of cell friends all doing their jobs, you would die. You're a team. You are accidentally greater than it, but certainly no more important.
Hey, little guy. It's great to meet you.
Are you my human? I can't believe you're real. I fought so hard for you. I have so many questions. I barely survived.
Now swap the white blood cell with you, and swap the you with God. You're both doing your best. You both want what's best for each other. But it can't explain everything to us. We aren't capable of understanding it, and that's okay. Our white blood cell is doing its best. It is doing its best. And as a member of the team, we must do our best. That means all three of us must live well in our own scopes. When the white blood cell is getting its ass beaten by a new virus, you can send a miracle its way with medicine. When I'm getting my ass beat by life circumstances, and my own poor life choices, it can send help my way. Neither I nor the white blood cell can fully understand our suffering or salvation. The white blood cell probably wants to know why we don't just send it medicine all day, every day. It doesn't understand why, if we're capable of that, it has to fight and suffer so much on its own.
We were facing certain death and mysterious robot soldiers showed up out of nowhere and saved us. Was that you?
Robot soldiers? Oh, you mean the medicine I took? Yeah, it looks like you could use a hand.
Why can't you send us medicine all the time?
I'm so sorry. That's a hard one to explain. Believe me, I wish I could.
I don't believe everything happens for a reason. I believe it intervenes less than it could because it doesn't want to supersede free will and evolution. I think evolution is the tool that's going to get us away from suffering the fastest, faster than any direct intervention could. We can also help a lot by exercising free will. If we don't want violence, it's our job to stop violence. If we don't want people to die of cancer, it's our job to cure cancer. If we don't want people to die in car crashes, it's our job to prevent car crashes. I believe it suffers too when innocents are hurt. It wants us to hurt as much as we want our lungs to hurt. We don't understand why it can't or won't stop bad things from happening. But for the first time in my life, I believe there's a good reason things are the way they are, and it's not its fault. It must have its own struggles too, and I'm sympathetic for whatever pain or sadness it feels. I wish I could help it the way it helps me. I don't understand the whole picture, but for the first time in my life, not only do I believe it exists, but I trust it. I believe it's imperfect and growing just like we are, and it's doing its best to end pain and create love. After this book is over, I'm going back to my normal, boring human life, and it's going to be great. What I learned. A belief I've held firm my entire life was that if one belief system or religion was right, that meant all the others had to be wrong. I drank a little bit of atheist Kool-Aid, and that maybe I wasn't always critical enough of all atheist ideas because I concluded that atheism was the only belief system I respected. In terms of multiple belief systems existing, I'm stunned to find out they can all be right, at least in core points. My grandfather saved my soul and my life. No question there. We've established that there are many personalities in the hive mind with a lot of power to help us that I can't explain. If my grandfather can save me, Jesus can definitely save you, Allah can save that guy over there, Krishna can save her, and none of us have to be wrong. All those spirits can exist simultaneously, it's not a contradiction. The atheists who believe in evolution are also thoroughly correct. We've seen evolution with our own eyes. I just think there's a scientifically rational additional component to life that is larger than an individual organism. The atheists are right that there's no such thing as the supernatural. Everything falls under the umbrella of science and physics. Again, atheists never rejected God because they hated the idea of God. They simply rejected the abandonment of science and evidence. If science can explain the supernatural, which I believe it can after everything I've seen, it's no longer supernatural, it's just science, and we can all be in agreement. Hell, even the alien conspiracy theorists can be right. To be fair, they always had way more photographic and testimonial evidence than religious people did, so I always felt it was unfair we called them crazy and gave religion a free pass. Maybe the lesson is we should be more open-minded moving forward. All of life in the entire universe is thoroughly connected and harmonious, and there's a lot more forms of life than we think. When considering having or lacking religious beliefs, we've all been too close-minded to see that each of us has a good reason to believe what we believe. We've made assumptions that put constraints on the question that didn't have to be there. What I know to be true and what you know to be true may seem to contradict at first, but if we had just dug deeper and respected each other, we would have found that isn't the case. We could both be right. God creating man in its own image may not be in contrast to evolution if you consider evolution as a tool to grow us. Aliens could be our brothers. Heaven exists, as does reincarnation, as does the option to be a complete nihilist and cease to move forward after you die. There's a meaning of life from the perspective of joining humanity, but also the free will to reject it and go your own way. Life is an infinitely complex spiral upward and downward from atoms to cells to organisms to planets to galaxies, and the most certain truth is that all progress on all scales of life inevitably moves towards love and cooperation as one universe-sized living being. The only beliefs I know to be truly wrong are those that promote hate and violence. We are not the only intelligent life in the universe, and we are not the most intelligent. Other life has already discovered the inevitable only path of progress towards intelligence, love, cooperation, and nonviolence. You are inevitably connected to all of humanity, and the consequences of your actions don't end after your death. A lot of us don't care if the planet burns up 100 years from now because we'll all be dead by then. But if humanity goes extinct, and it is a combination of all of humanity, your human afterlife dies with the extinction of humanity. If you want to live forever, you'd better ensure humanity does. Your best bet is to strive for a planet where everyone has fair access to housing, food, healthcare, and freedom, and to stop the wars. Karma is being born into the next life you deserve based on how well or poorly you lived this one. I can't help but feel the term karma, coming from the same religion that coined reincarnation, wasn't a coincidence. They were probably onto something. You'd hate to be reborn into a life of poverty and suffering if you could have eliminated poverty and suffering by helping out now. At the end of everything, I ask one last time, am I crazy? I still don't know. But if everyone else had the same mental breakdown I did, the world would be a better place. Love yourself, love others, contribute to the growth and survival of humanity and the planet. Be honest. For my grandparents.